Chapter 1. We are all little monsters, and one day we will be killed by the righteous Ultraman. Who wrote this destiny? If you want to see the outside world, you have to pay a big price. I already knew that. Who set this result? The world is gentle. Then why didn't even she deserve to survive? Hie Hie finished reading the book again, whispering like a dream, but the rhyme was full of anger. He closed the book steadily, flattened the page footer gently, and inserted it into the row on the bookshelf that belonged to this book. But it is much older than the other books. It's not that I don't care about it, but because I have looked through it too many times, and the thermal paper for rubbings inevitably has many tiny wrinkles and fold marks. He turned around and sat down in front of the second-hand laptop equipped with an Intel Pentium processor that he had bought with almost 1 or 2 months' salary from his part-time job. Then there was an inexplicable silence. Until he slammed his fist on the table, with a bang, but it was just a bang. It's like a drop of water dropped into the endless ocean, and it doesn't change anything. The curtains in this room were still tightly closed, and there was no sound around. He thought of that night again, when he picked up the book thrown on top of the trash can on his way home, and it looked like a film with the cover just opened. He has never read novels because he doesn't have a mobile phone and has no money to buy novels. His only sources of extracurricular knowledge were the library full of literary classics and his free time in computer classes. Some people have given everything they have just to survive. So, he took the novel back home after all. And this almost changed him from the past. When he read for the first time that she was able to leave home, when she was finally able to escape from that cage, she was so happy. He was so happy too. Even though he hadn't spoken to anyone for many years, he still said goodbye to the aunties who washed dishes with him in the restaurant when his part-time job ended that day. Although the aunties were shocked because they always thought he was a mute. Afterwards, he rode the only old retro bicycle left by his long-deceased parents and bought a string of candied haws with 3 hawthorn fruits on it on the street. The last time I ate it was 3 or 5 years ago. As he finished reading, he witnessed her happiness, witnessed her ignorance, witnessed her pain and innocence. Even in the end, he witnessed her death. But he was surprisingly calm at that moment. He just quietly closed the book, placed his hands lightly on the book, and stared out the window in a daze. There were no clouds, no stars or moon in the sky. But you can see countless snowflakes falling, a vast expanse of. She should have been the one who deserved happiness the most. She should have been the one who deserved to survive. Hie's face seemed to show no sadness or joy until 2 lines of tears rolled down from his eyes and dripped into the palm of his hand that was leaning on the book. Then one could see the sorrow and sadness in his heart at the moment. He was crying, feeling sad for her, and also feeling sad for himself. He graduated from primary school that year, and his parents promised him that if he could score above 90 points in 3 subjects, they would take him on a trip to Shangri-La during the holidays. This is the place he has mentioned countless times to his parents, because according to the books, that place is heaven. Mom always says that Grandpa went there. He missed his grandfather and wanted to ask him why he never came to see him. Finally, he passed the 3 subjects with scores above 90 as he wished. He excitedly shouted Shangri-La and ran towards home. But the closer he got to home, the louder the noises became, until he couldn't even hear what he was shouting. Until he stood in front of the familiar door of his home, the firelight illuminated the child's now dull face, and the 3 papers with 100 points on them had floated towards the sea of fire in front of him without him knowing. As if he had just woken up from a dream, he opened his mouth and kept shouting, and the tears in his eyes burst out like a dam breaking. But at this moment, the other sounds seemed too loud, the sound of running water, shouting, and sirens kept ringing in my ears. He still couldn't hear any sound from himself. Until there was a buzzing sound in my mind, as if a string suddenly broke. He finally heard the sound of himself falling to the ground. From that moment on, he didn't want to say anything. Then, it was countless moves, and moves. His former relatives kicked him around like a ball. If it weren't for the law, he would have been thrown into a corner to fend for himself. But fortunately, he had gotten used to this kind of life before he was able to support himself. After graduating from junior high school, he asked his relatives for everything he had. ID card, birth certificate, medical insurance card, inheritance that had long been eaten up by relatives, and that old retro bicycle. Of course, his relatives were happy to let him go, since all that was left of the inheritance was some unwanted things in a small, cramped house in a remote area. From then on, he began his life of studying and working part-time. Because he was too young, he couldn't find any formal part-time job. I could only go to various illegal construction sites and bars to do some work like moving bricks and collecting bottles. Fortunately, although he was small, his height was taller than other boys of the same age when he was in junior high school, and was even almost as tall as an average adult. In those places, it can be considered to be able to maintain its appearance. But a boy is a boy after all, and he never speaks. Because of this, I would always be teased, ridiculed, beaten, and kicked by many people. This is why Hie Hie always has more or less scars on his body every time he goes to class. But for the head teachers of provincial key classes, these may not be important. The key point is that Hie Hie's grades are always among the best in the school, which makes her, as the class teacher, proud. During the winter vacation of his second year in junior high school, he finally went to Shangri-La. Even though he already knew, there is no heaven on earth. This trip almost cost him all his savings. Sure enough, there is no paradise there, and no woman looking for her lover in her previous life through the wise men. There are only one snow-capped mountain pasture after another, and one forest river after another. He finally gave up. This continued until he reached his senior year of high school. He finally turned 18 and found a job washing dishes in a respectable restaurant. As soon as I finish work, I use any free time I have to study. This is what his parents wanted him to do well, so he must do it well. Until that night, I picked up this book. By this time, the college entrance examination was a thing of the past. Since that first time, he has gradually been able to have daily conversations with people. Since then, he often wondered what kind of feelings he had towards her. He always felt that he was very similar to her, but also quite different. She didn't want to speak, and neither did he. But she didn't want to hurt others, while he felt that the noise was too loud. She was trapped in the cage of so-called fate, and he was trapped in the manipulation of so-called relatives. But he escaped from it all in the end, while she was imprisoned by the so-called fate until the end. He came back to his senses, clenched his fists, and looked at the second-hand notebook he had bought almost an entire summer vacation ago. He unclenched his fists and began to tap on the keyboard, as if he was writing something. I don't know if it's because I had 3 part-time jobs today and it was too exhausting, but my mind became a mess as I was writing. My head couldn't help shaking, and the words on the screen in front of me gradually became blurred. He couldn't help but lean his head on his arms, his vision flickered, and in a trance, he actually saw that figure. Her soft red hair cascaded down like a waterfall, her long eyelashes trembled slightly above her deep rose-red eyes that lacked liveliness, her exquisite figure was looming in her white and red skirt Miko costume, pink petals fluttered all around her, her dress seemed to be blowing in the breeze, she was in the water. He could hardly believe it, and tried desperately to open his eyes to see what was really happening, but he couldn't even move his fingers. In the last clear look in the trance, he seemed to see her reaching out to him. A roar that seemed to have broken through time and space came through everything and resounded throughout the room, airy. Suddenly, the whole room seemed to break apart and dissipate like smoke. In the moment when everything disappeared, everything turned into darkness in an instant. Only on the screen of the second-hand notebook, a few lines of words were still flashing: "We are all little monsters, and one day we will be killed by the righteous Ultraman. This so-called fate, let me shatter it." Chapter 2. At the top of the world tree Yggdrasil, a certain being groaned towards the sky, and it sounded like a roar coming from infinitely far away in history. This scene kept appearing and replaying in Hie Hie's mind. I wanted to move closer, but I couldn't see clearly. I don't know how much time has passed, it seemed like countless long moments passed through Hie Hie's mind. Until the eye of the existence on the top of the tree suddenly opened, and the picture immediately shattered and fell like a mirror. Then it was quickly pieced together, but what was revealed at this moment was infinite darkness. Hie looked into the darkness and felt an inexplicable attraction, like the call of blood. At this moment, a holy sword suddenly seemed to cut through the center of the darkness. A horizontal line dividing the world appeared before our eyes. However, there was no pause at all. The horizontal line continued to expand and spread toward both ends, extending for countless miles. Accompanied by a strong sense of fear, even a trembling of the soul. That horizon disappeared at some point. An extremely huge golden dragon's pupil suddenly opened like the moment when night and day alternated. In the center of the pupil was an endless abyss like a sword. It stood tall in the middle, and infinite golden light continued to spread out from it. Hie inexplicably stretched out his hand, opened his palm, and grasped the dragon pupil in front of him, which was countless times larger than his own. Suddenly, a strong suction force seemed to arise in Hie Hie's hands. Everything in front of him seemed to be attracted by a black hole that could absorb the entire universe, and was approaching Hie Hie infinitely. Hie Hie was also infinitely approaching the abyss in his pupils, and even gradually merged into the abyss. Just as the dragon pupil gradually merged into his body. After an unknown amount of time, Hie Hie felt that his body finally came back to life. It was as if I had just fallen from the sky, and a feeling very similar to weightlessness gradually disappeared. The last image in my mind was that huge golden dragon eye. With her hand reaching out to him. Hie Hie suddenly sat up straight and slowly opened his eyes. The seat he was sitting on seemed to be equipped with a pneumatic or mechanical mechanism, which could operate the seat back to tilt backwards so that the occupant could lie in a supine position for maximum comfort and endurance. Did I buy this chair? Hie Hie felt his head swollen, as if a lot of things were suddenly stuffed into it. So he lay down again, closed his eyes and regained his consciousness. As if to mock himself, he whispered, "Sure enough, it was just a dream." At this moment, a broadcast voice came from somewhere, as if it was right next to my ear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing at Japan Airport in about 20 minutes. The ground temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. Thank you." Hie Hie started playing the piano right after listening to it. His mind suddenly became clear, and he began to recall. He fell asleep on the desk, there was no mobile phone or radio at home, and his computer had no music apps downloaded, because the house was remote and in a poor location, with almost no houses around. And the sound just now was obviously the broadcast in the plane. And the destination was Japan? Hie Hie looked around in horror. There were 40 seats arranged in a grid, 2 rows on each side and 4 rows in the middle. He himself sat in the 4th row on the far left, close to the aisle. Hie Hie quickly placed his hands above the porthole and looked out the window. There was no doubt that he was now at an altitude of 7,000 to 8,000 meters, and the clouds were clearly visible below. Hie Hie seemed to have all his strength drained away and fell back into his seat. He muttered to himself, "How did I suddenly get on the plane? Was it a dream?" He pinched his hand. Sizzle, no. Hie Hie took a breath and didn't control his strength well, so his hand was directly marked with a light purple mark. Have I been kidnapped? Then he paused, and laughed self-deprecatingly. I don't seem to be worth being robbed. Asking my relatives to redeem me? That would mean you don't know them at all. Besides, how can you kidnap someone and let him take a plane? Do I have sleepwalking? Why have I never had this before? Could it be? At this moment, a hand suddenly patted Hie Hie on the head, directly patting back the words Hie Hie had just muttered. Hie Hie, what's wrong with you? You're just sitting there mumbling to yourself, and just now you suddenly squeezed in next to me to look at the clouds. I asked you to sit here and watch for 2 or 3 hours before, isn't that enough? Hie Hie touched the back of his head and looked towards the direction of the sound source, which was the window seat next to him. Before he could turn his head completely, that hand suddenly grabbed him again, and the other hand clenched into a fist and pressed it against Hie Hie's head. The tone was excited and vulgar. You little brat, you usually pretend to be honest and kind in school, but you get excited when the time comes. How about it? I'll give you another chance. Do you want to join our women's bathhouse lurking plan? Hie Hie was very confused and quickly broke free from the man's hand and jumped up, shouting loudly, "Who are you?" Looking closely, I saw that the man had a limited edition Bayer dynamic headphone from Germany hanging around his neck, and his hair was permed and looked fluffy, but he looked, well, like a human. But the key point is that Hie Hie is very sure that he doesn't know this person at all. At this time, the attention of people in other positions was drawn here. Those who were close to him all started asking, "Hey Hie Hie, can you be quiet? I was just about to fall asleep when you woke me up. Zhang Xiaodong, why don't you just start over? The plane has been flying for a whole day and night, and you told us that you just fell asleep." Hie Hie Hie. Speaking of sleeping, I just dreamed about my junior classmate Li Shatong from class 2, 3, of senior high school. She and I. Oh my god, how can there be such a shameless person in the world? Hie Hie, what's wrong with you? You don't even remember Li Ruan, are you losing your memory? No way. Hie Hie, your way of avoiding questions is very low. Hie Hie looked at the noisy and joking crowd in this section, and many people called out his name directly. But the problem is, Hie Hie doesn't know any of these people. So he fell back into his seat again. At this time, a much more mature voice sounded, okay, stop being so sarcastic, take care of your stuff, the plane is about to land. Good. Teacher Zhang, why don't you take Hie Hie to have his brain checked after we get off the plane? He has lost his memory. Ha 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 ha. Hie Hie didn't have the energy to care about these things at this moment. He even started to think back. Could it be that he really had lost his memory? As he was thinking about it, he stopped again. After a while, Li Ruyan suddenly hung his limited edition headphones on Hie Hie's head, patted Hie Hie's left shoulder and said urgently, let me go, I can't hold it anymore. Hie Hie then woke up as if from a dream, stepped his legs outward, and let Li Ruyan go out. Just now they were playing and laughing, and Hie Hie didn't miss any key information, but suddenly he wanted to confirm something, so he hurriedly pulled the corner of Li Ruyan's clothes and asked, Li Ruyan, me, we? Which school are we from? And now, what year is it? Zhang Ruyan turned around, his face full of sorrow and despair. Hey Hie Hie, you're not really losing your memory, are you? I'll make sure you go to my hospital for a checkup when we get back. If you haven't lost your memory, I'll kill you with just 2 slashes. After saying that, he immediately tore off Hie Hie's hand and ran forward. Hie Hie still didn't give up, he changed his hand and reached forward again. But he didn't hold it firmly, and the corner of his clothes slipped out of his hand. 2009. Shilan Middle School. When I get back, I will definitely catch you and take you to the best brain doctor in my family for a checkup. Li Ruyan said this as he ran towards the toilet angrily. But Hie was really completely stunned at this moment. He couldn't control himself after hearing Li Ruyan's first sentence. He originally just wanted to confirm whether it was the Hangman Middle School where he had studied. Shilan. He was so familiar with this name. An irrepressible joy surged through my entire body. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. Hie covered his face with his hands, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise under his palms. He tried hard to stop his laughter. He was so happy at this moment. But why did the tears keep flowing from my eyes, leaving tear marks on my face, and I couldn't stop them no matter how hard I tried to wipe them. At this moment, in the headphones that Li Ruyan put on Hie, the volume was playing Second Heaven sung by El Junja. The fairy is dancing in front of my nose. My eyesight is blurry due to excessive blood loss. The murderous aura shattered the tragic notes in the throat. Resurrection the next moment, repeating the cycle. No one asks why. The loneliness of running alone in the forest. The distant sounds of fighting were forgotten. If you cut me, I will retaliate. Everything I witnessed. The real existence of this world. Looking out through the porthole at this moment, the outline of a spire painted in orange and white can be vaguely seen, like a 4,000-ton monster showing its head. 9 TV stations including NHK and 4 FM radio stations use this as a transmission tower. Tokyo Tower. At this moment, Hie seemed to have recovered his mood. Only the smile on the corner of his mouth remained, and the ballad was still humming in his ears. I have traveled through time, and now I am going to Tokyo. And she's in Tokyo. Chapter 3. As soon as Hie finished speaking, a sound seemed to come from the dome, buzz, and in Hie's mind it was like the sound of a bell. The world suddenly came to a standstill. Hie looked around in surprise. Everyone seemed to be imprisoned in time and unable to move. Just when I was wondering, a mechanical voice suddenly sounded. Congratulations to the Chosen One for taking control of the current situation. Now activate the 10-year sign-in Super God system, 15%, 40%, 75%, 99%, binding activation successful. Hie suddenly felt weightless for a moment and appeared in a wonderful space. He looked around and realized that he seemed to be standing on the top of a high mountain, with countless stars shining all around him. The big words binding activation successfully in front of him seemed as grand and majestic as if they were cast from the stars. But Hie didn't have the slightest fear in his heart, even he himself was puzzled by this. Logically speaking, when had he ever seen such a scene? But ever since he had seen, or dreamt of that golden dragon eye, he felt that nothing could be more terrifying. At this time, the big characters in front seemed confused by Hie's reaction. There was even some doubt in the mechanical voice. Aren't you shocked? Hie was honest, not at all. What is the situation now? This super god system seemed to be offended again, and the mechanical voice became even colder. This is the inner space of the super god system, and you are the chosen one selected by this system from among all the worlds. Under the protection of this system's locked passive super god skill, infinite rebirth, only for the chosen one, you only need to force yourself to survive in this dragon clan world for 10 years as usual. You can unlock the power to enslave everything, the realm of crushing everything, the only existence at the peak, absolute power. Superpower existing for 10 years can gain such power? I have to say it is extremely exciting. But let's not discuss whether this is true or not. 10 years? But 2 years later, the night of wind and tide is coming. It's also her. Hie Hie clearly understood that in this world with dragons, if he wanted to save her, he didn't need to fight against some strong criminals, but the white dragon who refused to submit to Nidhogg, the White King, and his loyal descendants and pursuers. And along the way, there will inevitably be countless malicious intent lurking in the darkness. To him now, every one of them could kill him with one foot. Therefore, he must become stronger. Quickly become stronger. So at present, he does not know whether he has the blood of the dragon race and the word spirit, so he must hold this power in his hands. Sorry, I can't wait that long. Can you give me this power now? No such option. Can the time limit be changed to 1 or 2 years? No such option. Can I choose to transfer this power to someone else? The time limit is 2 years. No such option. In fact, it was pretty much what Hie Hie expected. With such a powerful force, 10 years is actually not a long time. The above questions are just for confirmation. Hie Hie pondered for a while, slowly raised his head, and looked at the still flashing font in front of him very seriously. Then, please untie me. I must remind the Chosen One that with the assistance of the passive divine skill Infinite Rebirth locked by this system, 10 years will pass in the blink of an eye. To put it more bluntly, the super god power itself is completely prepared for you. It just requires you to live naturally in this world for at least 10 years and be completely accepted by this world before this power can be given to you. Therefore, 10 years is essential. So, after I gain superpowers, can I still save people who have been dead for 8 years? Super God's power is the power of absolute conquest, without time, space, and yin-yang skills. In that case, please untie me. Helping the Chosen One is the only meaning of this system's existence. The current test results show that the system is no longer necessary. After providing the necessary help to the Chosen One, it will begin to hibernate indefinitely. As soon as the mechanical sound fell, the countless stars around seemed to have been drained of all their light and began to flicker rapidly. The principle of the system exists to help the Chosen Ones, without violating the premise of unlocking the Super God power in 10 years. The Chosen One will still retain the passive Super God skill locked by this system, Unlimited Rebirth. The specific ability is that the moment the life function is lost, the body of the Chosen One will immediately move to a safe place to rebirth. Note, this skill is also a Super God power, but it conflicts with locking, so the Chosen One may have defects. Although it can have it, the system will try its best to randomly extract a non-supernatural power for the Chosen One. At this moment, each of the stars that are still lit around represents a power of the word spirit. The Chosen One can also extract it by feeling. The system will not provide data analysis for this. Hie Hie is very satisfied with this result. Hie Hie had the highest expectations for Infinite Rebirth because he really didn't think he could remain safe and sound facing those enemies. But if we could be reborn, it would increase many possibilities and tolerance rates. As for extracting the power of the word spirit, to be honest, Hie Hie didn't have any lucky mentality. After all, he really had the good luck that even drinking water could fill his teeth, and even a $5 bill on the ground could be blown away by the wind. At this moment, the stars that were still bright around began to move inexplicably, gradually gathering towards the star above Hie Hie's head. Looking up, the stars around me gathered above my head and arranged themselves into a symbol in the 8 directions. Is this an arrow? Hie Hie seemed to understand something, and clearly saw the big word system in front of him flash. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he whispered, "Thank you." Then he raised his right hand high and pointed at the star above his head. If you look closely, you can see that the star is actually shining in 7 colors. It has been detected that the Chosen One has chosen the power of the word spirit himself. The extraction is complete. The power of the word spirit that the Chosen One has extracted is, word spirit hypernuclear replication serial number, 00 bloodline origin, a certain existence at the top of the world tree danger level, unknown discovered and named by, none introduction, any word spirit can be copied and its power amplified. The degree of amplification depends on certain attributes of the word spirit's owner. The copies of word spirits can be infinitely stacked. Note, this word spirit has a prerequisite for activation. Details, unknown, excessive use of this word spirit will cause severe sequelae. Details, unknown, the use of this word spirit will attract the attention of other blood systems within a certain range to varying degrees. Details: after other blood systems sense it once, they will no longer be able to sense it, and under the influence of infinite rebirth, other blood systems cannot sense the chosen one through this blood system's aura, and the rest is unknown. Since this word spirit has no previous owner or the previous owner's information is too old to be investigated, we are unable to provide more information to the chosen one. As soon as he finished speaking, the rock on Hie Hie's head fell down with a bang and landed on Hie Hie's outstretched hand. Hie Hie put his hand down and clenched his fist, with a colorful light shining at his fingertips. Then he stretched out his right hand in the direction of the system characters, clenched his fist, raised his thumb, and smiled brightly. That's enough. Thank you. You've helped me a lot. I'll have to forge the next path on my own. Then, a hexagram array filled with an ancient and heavy atmosphere appeared under Hie Hie's feet. A white light continuously rushed upward from the formation, covering Hie Hie's body, while the other end had already flown infinitely far into the sky. Hie Hie's body gradually became transparent, flickering. At this moment, the system's mechanical voice suddenly sounded again, which made people feel a sense of popularity. May your wish come true, Eternal Chosen One. Hie Hie naturally heard it. He clenched his right fist, punched the gradually dimming system, and shouted loudly, "Must." Chapter 4. It was as if Hie Hie just opened his eyes and returned to reality, and everything around him started to work again. Until this moment, Hie Hie's fists were still clenched tightly. The residual warmth still left in it continued to show everything that had just happened. It all actually happened. The super divine skill infinite rebirth and the word spirit of an unknown existence on the top of the world tree. Super core replication. They both sound very powerful, but their flaws are very many and obvious. But, it's much better than nothing. At this moment, Hie Hie's heart is full of confidence and courage for the future. But when I came to my senses, the plane had already landed and everyone was packing up to get off the plane. The things on the luggage racks had been scattered. Only Hie Hie slowly unbuckled his seat belt, with a look of ignorance and confusion on his face. By the way, can someone tell me, what should I do now? Li Ruyan took his Coach Sports computer backpack from the luggage rack. At this time, there were only 2 or 3 people in the cabin. He looked around and saw Hie Hie still standing there in a daze. He was so angry that he slapped his forehead and gritted his teeth. You are not careful in making friends. Then he took a shoulder bag from the luggage rack, called out Hie Hie's name and threw it to him. Hie Hie, you are so stupid. Still standing there, don't you want your heirloom shoulder bag anymore? Just when he was at a loss, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. He turned around and saw a military green shoulder bag flying towards his head in a perfect arc. Hie Hie quickly reached out to catch it. A small shoulder bag handed down from the family. After Hie Hie received it, it still seemed a little heavy. I wanted to open it and take a look, but found that even the pull tab was gone. I could only hold the slider and unzip it little by little. After much difficulty, I opened the bag and pried open the mouth, but there was very little inside. A very thick diary, a few keys, a bottle of medicine, a Nokia phone for the elderly without dial buttons, a charging cable and a palm-sized model. Take out the model and take a closer look. This model, and the bicycle my parents left behind. Hie Hie couldn't help but raise his right hand and gently stroke the model. There seemed to be nothing in his eyes, yet everything seemed extremely complicated. Li Ruyan had already run over, grabbed Hie Hie's right arm and ran. You've had this model since elementary school, and you still haven't seen enough. Hurry up, the cabin door is about to close. You're really possessed by a ghost today. It seems like we'll have to find a Taoist priest to exorcise the ghost for you when we get back. Oh no, since we're already in Japan, I might as well find an onmyoji to take a look at you. It's such a sin to have you as my friend. They didn't see many people all the way down the gangway, which showed that they were indeed very slow. My feet kept running on this land, the sea breeze blowing from Inoshima touched my face and blew into my mouth, it seemed a little salty. A screen not far away was scrolling, "Welcome to Tokyo." It was not until now that Hie Hie suddenly felt the reality. I really arrived in Tokyo. After finally catching the shuttle bus, Hie Hie and Li Ruyan were so tired that they collapsed at the entrance. My goodness, you two are really extreme. Is Fast and Furious 5 being filmed in Japan? Don't mention it, Hie Hie is crazy. At this moment, a man who looked sleepy walked up to them, and everyone was shocked. You two are really impressive. You have a whole carload of people waiting for you. Go and take a seat. He and Yi both grinned, touched their heads, and walked to the back to find a seat. They pinched their noses when they passed the man. I'm not saying anything, Mr. Zhang, you're already drinking right after getting off the bus? You reek of alcohol. Zhang Yan turned around and kicked Li Ruyan in the butt, causing him to pounce forward again. Oh! Can you give me a little face? My dad paid for most of the expenses of this trip to Japan. Can you please show some attitude to the top brother? Just as he stood firm and was about to speak, he saw Zhang Yan's foot coming again, so he quickly ran to the back to find a place. Finally I found 2 empty seats in a row in the second to last row. Li Ruyan asked Hie Hie to sit by the window, with a cocky look on his face. Sit inside, don't you like to see the scenery? Oh, it was me who made you come just by saying a few words to your aunt, right? However, Hie Hie had no idea what he was talking about, so he could only reply, yet. Only when I sat down did I realize that the bicycle model was still in my hand. Then he opened his shoulder bag again, without even having time to zip it up. Hie Hie quickly checked and fortunately, nothing seemed to be missing. So he put the bicycle model in steadily. If we want to understand the current situation now, we can only find a breakthrough from these things. Hie Hie first took out the Nokia phone for the elderly which was missing the dial button. After long pressing the power button to turn it on, Nokia's iconic ringtone Nokia tune adapted from Granval's will sound. It is very conspicuous on the small shuttle bus. Hie Hie quickly covered the speaker. It did make the sound a lot quieter. It seemed that no one noticed, everyone was talking about their own things, and Li Ruyan next to him was also immersed in his own world of music. After pressing a few buttons, I opened the address book and 4 contacts were clearly visible, Dad, Mom, Sister and Li Ruyan. Hie Hie felt an inexplicable beat in his heart, and some deep-seated emotions seemed to be brought out again. Suddenly, the heart began to beat violently. And there seems to be some difficulty breathing and chest pain. Hie Hie couldn't help but stretch out his right hand and grab his heart tightly, his face turned extremely pale. At this time, Li Ruyan seemed to have discovered Hie Hie's abnormality, and suddenly thought of something, his face suddenly became serious and anxious. He quickly took out a bottle of medicine from Hie Hie's shoulder bag and quickly unscrewed the cap. Because he was too anxious, he couldn't hold the bottle cap firmly and it flew out. He poured a pill out of the medicine bottle and quickly put it into Hie Hie's mouth, then opened a bottle of mineral water and poured it into Hie Hie's mouth. But Hie Hie seemed to have fainted at this time, and Li Ruyan hurried to tell Zhang Yan and the driver. The entire shuttle bus suddenly became chaotic. Up to this point, this is what Hie Hie finally felt and saw. It seemed like countless centuries had passed, and there was only endless darkness before their eyes, with Hie Hie drifting endlessly in it. I don't know how long it took, but I finally felt something in my body and my hands and feet seemed to be able to move. I wanted to move my hands, but I could only make my fingers tremble slightly. The patient in the ICU ward is showing signs of waking up. Dr. Tan. Dr. Tan. Faintly, one seemed to be able to hear voices and the noisy sound of footsteps. At this time, Hie Hie regained some strength and tried his best to open his eyes. But every time it could only open a little, and then suddenly closed as if losing strength. I tried countless times before I finally opened my eyes. The first thing you see is a turned-on lead tube light. Is this, the ceiling? I wanted to get up, but I no longer had the strength. It seemed that only the eyeballs could move slightly, and they could look around at any angle they could. There seemed to be high-precision medical equipment all around, bedside monitors, multifunctional respiratory therapy machines, anesthesia machines, electrocardiographs. There is also a group of doctors and nurses. In this way, Hie Hie could almost realize his current condition. I'm in the hospital? And in the intensive care unit. But what puzzled Hie Hie was that he had never had any serious illness since he was a child, let alone one that required admission to the intensive care unit. Moreover, my parents and sister are also in the address book. Suddenly, a bold guess flashed through Hie Hie's mind, could it be that I didn't travel to this world by myself, but directly occupied the body of someone in this world? If that's the case, then it all makes sense. If his body had not been unable to move, he would have really wanted to hold his head and let out a long sigh. Hey, I should have asked the system first. Chapter 5. So tired. Why do my eyes feel so tired after just opening them for a while? Just thinking about this, Hie Hie gradually fell into sleep again. Dr. Tan. Aren't you the most authoritative expert on heart disease? I specially called your team from the main hospital to Tokyo. You're telling me, he's dying? What do you mean? In a trance, Hie Hie seemed to hear Li Ruyan's voice, intermittently. It seems like he is angry. Hie Hie. You can't die. I swore an oath to my aunt to bring you here. You little BD. Can't you do what you said by grabbing my collar before? It seems like he is regretting. If I hadn't insisted on bringing you to Japan, would all this have never happened? I shouldn't have listened to those bullshit experts. You're already much better. It seemed as if he was crying and praying. Do you still remember, on the rooftop of Shilan, you seemed to be crazy, you just stood there crying like a tearful person, even though I was the one standing on the edge of the rooftop. I really came down here because I couldn't bear to see you crying, really, haha, you even punched me a few times. You were holding your chest with a look of pain on your face, crying and saying to me, "Live well. That's why I am still alive today. Hie Hie, you have to survive for me." These words kept circling in Hie Hie's mind, but he really couldn't recall any memory of this story. After all, he is not the he in the story. In the original world, Hie Hie seemed to have never had any friends. Studying and part-time jobs have almost filled up his entire life. Even, buried his emotions. Besides, no one would be willing to approach a mute who is always covered in scars, right? Not necessarily. In the dark world, a beam of dazzling light suddenly shone through along with this voice. Hie Hie looked in the direction where the light came from, and the source seemed to be a door. Light was still rushing out from inside the door. Hie Hie instinctively moved towards the door and soon stood outside it. After a closer look, it was actually just a door frame. The host has opened the door to the visitor. Hie Hie walked straight in. Unlike the world Hie Hie was in before, this world is full of light at first glance. "Hi, Hie Hie." Hie Hie turned his head and looked in the direction where the voice came from. He was shocked at first, then he understood and said with a smile, "Hi, Hie Hie." The person in front of him looked exactly like Hie Hie. But if someone were to tell the two apart, it would be very easy. Because in Hie Hie's eyes it was as if the sky was about to rain, grey and gloomy. But the eyes of this Hie Hie in front of him seemed to be filled with the mountain moon and dawn, showing his spiritual charm. "Wow, we really look alike." As he said this, the Hie Hie in front of him ran forward and touched Hie Hie all over. "Yeah, they are exactly the same." But at this moment Hie Hie felt extremely conflicted. This person is the real owner of this body, and he also has his own life. Although I came to this body inexplicably, I am still occupying someone else's body after all. But I finally came to this world, and I can save her world. Hie Hie looked solemn, holding the shoulders of Hie Hie who was still observing him with both hands. "Stand it firmly in place and take a few steps back. Stand about half a person's body length away." He bent his waist almost 90 degrees and said loudly to Hie Hie in front of him, "First of all, I have to say sorry to you. I really don't know why I traveled to this world and occupied your body. I am deeply sorry for this. But I hope we can discuss this issue, because in this world, there is something that only I can do, something that I must do. There is also a ridiculous fate, a person who must be saved, a person who only exists in this world, at this time. If that doesn't work, we can try to possess the body in installments. For example, you take one day and I take one day, or..." Hie Hie felt a little panicked, and his tone became a little faster. But before he could finish his words, Hie Hie interrupted him. Hie Hie watched his feet walk to him, and he lifted himself up with both hands. For some reason, he smiled an inexplicably sad smile. "No. No, it's not you who occupied my body, brother, because I'm already dead." Hie Hie froze after hearing this, as if he couldn't understand the meaning of already dead. At this time, Hie Hie seemed to smile a little awkwardly after saying this, and the look in his eyes turned back to the mountain moon and dawn, as if the sadness on his face just now was just a dream. Isn't he your brother? From the look in your eyes, I'm sure you're older than me. If I guessed wrong, this would be very embarrassing. You know, every boy has longed to have a brother, and is it because of a heart attack?" Hie Hie interrupted him. He just continued to smile and replied calmly, "Well, congenital heart disease, on that plane to Japan. It was my first time on a plane and my first time going abroad. I was so excited. Then that night, he had an attack. He ran to get the medicine from the bag and broke the tab. Haha, this is a funny cause of death. To be honest, I had a sense of realization at the time, knowing that I was hopeless. But I still endured the pain and returned to my seat. After all, even if you are going to die, you shouldn't cause trouble to others, right? Hie Hie couldn't laugh at all. He looked at him seriously and said, "You are still here, right? Then you can definitely still." I tried, and I can't go back. As soon as I leave this space, I will hear the sound of a trumpet, and a golden door will appear in the sky. A dazzling cross will hang in front of the door, and 6 winged angels will fly freely outside the door. That must be heaven, isn't it? Hie Hie seemed to be reminded of some memories and he raised his head slightly and looked towards the sky. But fortunately, after death, I came to this space inexplicably. A voice called System told me that the moment of his coming has finally come for those he has waited for countless years. This space was created by him. As long as I stay here, my soul will not dissipate because I have no body to rest in. So, I've been staying here. I just can't bear to leave my parents and my sister. He said that this was just done as a side job while helping the Chosen One. What a proud and gentle person. Hie Hie naturally knew what the system was referring to, and when he thought of everything that happened in that space, a smile appeared on his face, as if he was very sure of what he said. Having said this, he seemed a little tired and simply sat down, thus missing Hie Hie's smile. Until just now, I actually heard a human voice again. I heard a human voice in my own body. It was you. Well, even though what you said was really too negative, if I had the time I would really like to have a good talk with you. He suddenly looked up at the sky, then lowered his head and rubbed his ears with both hands, as if talking to himself, "Please, give me some more time." Then he smiled and looked at Hie Hie. "But now, there's really no time. Please let me call you brother. I'm leaving soon, brother." I don't know why, but this space seems to have started to collapse at some point in time. The sound of the horn in my ears is getting louder and louder, and the door is getting closer and closer to me. Dad, Mom, Sister, they are all the people I cherish the most. This is not a request, but a hope. I hope that brother will not tell them about my death. From now on, I am the brother and the brother is me. Mom sometimes says things that are not pleasant to the ear, but she actually has a soft heart. Dad doesn't like to talk much, but my brother and I have never lacked food and clothing under his protection. My sister is going to be a sophomore in high school this year, and she's not very good at math. I hope you can be more patient with her when she asks you questions. Also, tell them not to save on electricity in the summer and turn on the fan, and in the winter. And that guy Li Ruin, even though he looks silly on the surface, he's actually very fragile and sensitive inside. When he came to his senses, he didn't realize that he was already in tears. Haha, why are you crying anyway? You clearly wanted to hold it back, but what a failure. I was just saying that Li Ruin is fragile and sensitive. As he said this, he raised his arm and quickly wiped away his tears. Well, that's it. But I still think, if only I could have a little more time. As he spoke, the golden door appeared behind him without him noticing. He seemed to notice something and slowly stood up. I wanted to force a smile so that I could feel happier when I saw Hie Hie for the last time. But as soon as he raised his head, Hie Hie was already standing in front of him. Hie Hie raised his right hand, gently wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and then smiled gently. From this moment on, I am your brother, and they are my father, mother, and sister. Although I have almost forgotten how to get along with my family, I will learn it again. He looked at Hie Hie's gentle expression at this moment, smiled brightly, and ran towards the golden door. Until you are already inside the door. Just as the door was about to close, he suddenly turned around. Although the tears are still falling, the blooming smile is even brighter, isn't it? He shouted to Hie Hie, "Brother. Everything from now on will depend on you. It may be hard, but you will definitely be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish and save the people you want to save. FK your fate." Chapter 6. His figure gradually disappeared in the light overflowing from the door. The golden gate also disappeared without a trace. Like it never existed. Hie Hie stared at the direction where he disappeared for a long time. Behind the door, is heaven. After a brief silence, Hie Hie's eyes seemed never so clear and firm. Heaven is no longer my goal. From the moment I came into this world, I already had something I wanted to pursue. And now, I have something to protect again. I should go too. Then he resolutely turned around and walked back. At some point, a huge whirlpool appeared out of thin air behind him. There seemed to be 7 colors of light flowing together. It is confirmed that the Chosen One has no vital signs in his body, an infinite rebirth has started. Hiss, 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 an unknown error occurred, the Chosen One cannot be resurrected immediately. Estimated resurrection time, 1 day later in the other world, i.e. 24 hours in Tokyo time, it is detected that there is no danger in the Chosen One's body. The rebirth location is Shuntendo University Hospital. Please enter the door of rebirth. The Chosen One. There was nothing inside the door, only a pure white staircase that went up continuously. Hie Hie didn't hesitate at all and stepped onto the stairs and walked up step by step. The stairs seemed endless, leading to the end of the sky. There was no exit in sight. However, Hie Hie just looked in the direction where the stairs extended and kept walking and walking. It seemed as if he could actually see where those stairs ended. He certainly couldn't see the end. In fact, ever since he stepped through this door, what he saw before his eyes and what he felt with his body were all he had felt since coming to this world. It was like being trapped in a dream. Hie Hie watched from a god's perspective and felt all the sensations until he died in Shuntendo University Hospital. Until this dream was about to come to an end, there were no more stairs ahead. The end of the door is the other world. The road to rebirth is infinitely open to you, the eternal Chosen One. Haha. Hie Hie sat up immediately. For some reason, he felt extremely short of oxygen and breathed in big gulps of air. When he felt much better, he immediately began to observe his rebirth situation. It seems that the defect that the system mentioned before has changed from immediate rebirth to rebirth 1 day after death in the other world, that is, in this world. This defect is the worst possible situation for me. I am really lucky. I only have 2 years. So now, according to Hie Hie's observation, he was covered with a white cloth, with a military green shoulder bag placed next to his head. The 4 identical walls were covered with bunches of chrysanthemums. The room was small and pure white, with nothing in it except the bed he was lying on. There was no window at all. It can be fully analyzed that I should have been declared dead. So now, how can I explain to others my resurrection from the dead? Hie Hie suddenly stopped living in Bungbu because he found that he had no idea how to explain it. If he was reborn immediately, it could be explained as fake death. Wait, why can't it be explained as suspended animation? The current progress of human medical research on the suspended animation state is almost infinitely close to 0. When everything is unexplainable, it's natural to think in the direction of possible existence, isn't it? But Hie Hie can't explain this phenomenon to anyone now. Because no matter whether the explanation was successful or not, judging from what Li Ruyan said to himself before the bed, it would be impossible for me to stay in this city anymore. But at least for now, Hie Hie still has to stay in this city. He must first confirm Aries' current situation. I really hope Li Ruyan hasn't told our family that I'm dead yet. The brilliant smile of that little brother emerged in Hie Hie's mind. Hie Hie lifted the white cloth covering her legs, walked to the door and listened carefully. We can vaguely hear human voices. Considering the location of the morgue, we can actually hear human voices, which means that it is probably mostly daytime outside now. Well, now I have to put my acting skills to the test, even though I've never learned it before. You have to find a legitimate reason for suddenly disappearing from Tokyo, right? Click, the door of a single morgue in Shuntendo University Hospital suddenly opened. A young man with panic and confusion in his eyes stumbled out. The patient's clothes he was wearing indicated that he was a patient. There was a red tag tied to her hand. This means that the patient has clearly been declared dead. This young man looked like a walking corpse. Every time I met someone on the road, they would ask, "Who am I? Where is this?" Unfortunately, almost no one could understand what he said. Except for a few patients and nurses who have learned some Hyuxia. He stumbled around the hospital and asked for a long time until he walked out of the hospital and disappeared among the crowd. No one could answer him. Or rather, they dare not. Yes, who dares to answer the words of a dead person? Haha, woo, ha 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 ha. It was already midnight. In the main monitoring room of Shuntendo University Hospital, Li Ruyan, with red and swollen eye bags and a scruffy beard, was looking at the stumbling figure on a surveillance screen in front of him, crying and laughing. It's like seeing a miracle that radiates infinite light. The light was so bright that he couldn't stop crying, and the miracle made him so happy that he wanted to kneel down. Hie Hie. Brat Hie Hie, you're not dead, you're not dead. I knew it. How could you not do what you said? However, everyone else present had expressions of shock and confusion on their faces. A dead person ran out of the hospital? If the evidence had not been before their eyes, they would have simply regarded what they heard as a plot from a movie about some Oriental Taoist priest with straight eyebrows. At this time, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and meticulously combed hair walked up to Li Ruyan. His face was full of worry and anxiety. Master Li, in medicine, even if it's suspended animation, it can only last for 2 hours. I only declared your friend dead 3 hours after he showed no signs of life. But he is alive again, isn't he? He is alive. Li Ruyan suddenly turned around and stared at the middle-aged man. The dark circles under his eyes from having hardly slept for several days and the red and swollen eye bags from crying made Li Ruyan's eyes look like they came from hell, deep and dark. Dr. Tan, is this what you call a top-notch authoritative diagnosis? Tan Zhong was so frightened by this look that he sat down on the ground, and his golden glasses fell to the ground. He quickly groped for his glasses on the ground. At this moment, everything he saw was distorted and dark. Seeing this, a nurse hurried over, picked up the glasses, and handed them to Tan Zhong, who was still groping. Tan Zhong quickly put on his glasses, and everything in front of him finally returned to normal. He quickly stood up, wiped the cold sweat that had oozed out of his forehead, and looked at Li Ruyan's back. The ethics of a senior doctor still drove him to speak carefully. Master Li, your friend's fake death and suspected amnesia after waking up are unprecedented in the medical field of our country, or even the world. I have been practicing medicine for more than 20 years. I have won the Lasker Award, the Wolf Prize, the Shulan Award, and almost all of them except the Nobel Prize in Medicine. But I have never seen something so beyond medical reason. But Li Ruyan didn't even turn his head after hearing this. He still stared at the surveillance video from this morning and said in an unquestionable tone, yes, how could I not have seen it before? Isn't it the first time now? Amnesia caused by fake death. This is the best explanation right now, and it's also the truth. There are too many unsolved problems in the world. What people cannot understand is defined as impossible and miraculous. Overthrowing the past and creating the future is what researchers should do, Dr. Tan. Besides, he's the only friend I recognize. He is a miracle in himself. Chapter 7. Hiko Hero. Li Ruyan called out the name for no apparent reason. But the problem is that among all the people present, no one's name contains Yanhong. Just when everyone was confused, a figure slowly walked out from a dark corner that no one noticed. If it weren't for his rainbow dragonfly leather shoes stepping on the ground, making a clacking sound, no one noticed that there was a person standing in that corner. Until the man slowly walked out of the corner. The shadow faded from his face. If any of Li Ruyan's classmates were present, they would have noticed the person who appeared at this moment. It's their class teacher, Zhang Yan. Master Li, I'm. Zhang Yan lowered his eyebrows, stood straight, put his hands together, with his middle finger and index finger touching each other, one higher than the other. Bend the little finger and ring finger of the left hand, and place these two fingers of the right hand on top of them. Cross your thumbs again. That is, the ninja salute is complete. As I recall, you are from the Fuma family. Yes, I am the A-rank ninja hired for you by Sir at the Fuma family, Fuma Yanhong. I am responsible for lurking and protecting your safety. Li Ruyan didn't even turn his head, but just kept staring at the figure on the surveillance screen who was about to walk out of the hospital. If we call the police and ask them to find us, there may be a lot of unnecessary trouble and redundant procedures. I don't know what his current physical condition is, but I have to take him back. The sooner the better. I must give my uncle and aunt a complete Hie. Fengmo Yanhong listened quietly, then he really raised his eyebrows, still looking sleepy. But the depth and murderous look in his eyes showed his success as a ninja. I understand, sir. After saying that, he walked out of the monitoring room. If everyone's eyes had not been on this man who suddenly appeared, they might even feel that it was just a sound as the phone went out. However, what they are looking for at this moment is Hie. At this moment, even he himself didn't know where in Tokyo he was standing. He just drank the northwest wind with a confused look on his face. It's so embarrassing. I just wandered around the hospital for a long time before I found the exit, and now I searched my entire bag and found that there were only 300 yuan in national currency. It was hard to find the Japanese bank, but I didn't know Japanese, so I had to talk and gesture to get it exchanged for Japanese yen. But first things first. We need to find a place to live first. If you use the 5,409 yen you get, you can't even live in a daily rental house for more than a day or two, let alone a house. Then, we can only go there. Hie Hie recalled that when he was wandering around the city, he seemed to have seen that place along the way. Well, that's indeed a good place. So I turned around and walked back along the route of memory. After a while, they stood in front of a building. On the sign in front of the door, it is clearly written in black and white font. Shuyi Internet Cafe. Although Hie Hie didn't know what the word meant. But through the transparent glass door, there were rows and rows of comic book shelves inside, with people moving among them, taking and putting books away. Even further inside, there were people with towels on their shoulders and basins in their hands, and the foam used for hair removal had not yet been wiped off their beards. When you walk in, you can see 2 rows of small rooms separated by one another on the left and right. The door is a typical Japanese sliding door structure, but the difference of this internet cafe is that each adjacent door has a different color. Hie Hie wanted to ask about the price, but he couldn't find where to ask. Because once you enter you'll find that the layout inside is even more complex and intricate. At this time, the red sliding door in front of Hie Hie's right slowly opened. A man with long black hair came out. He looks to be in his 20s at most, or should we call him a teenager? Wearing Granoff custom men's tight sleeve liner. A black coat was draped over his left arm, and in his right hand he held a silver-stamped briefcase. This kind of clothing combination is quite different from the atmosphere of this internet cafe. When walking past Hie Hie, he still had a look of confusion and puzzlement on his face, as if he had encountered some century-long problem. Muttering to himself, the game is difficult. At this moment, apart from this person, there is no other figure to be seen in the corridor that runs through 20 or 30 meters. So Hie Hie decided to use that trick on this guy. The method of talking and gesturing at the same time. Hie Hie turned around and called the man. And the man stopped immediately. But if Hie Hie looked closely, he would have found that the man's hand holding the suitcase had blue veins, his brows were slightly furrowed, and his left hand, which was holding the coat, had been put into his trouser pocket at some point. All I see is, a young man wearing a patient's clothes? While talking, he kept gesturing. He first said, "Hello, sir," but he spoke in Hyuxia. Then he took out a 5,000 yuan note, straightened it out, and showed it to himself. "Excuse me, this money." He pointed to the room he had just come out of. That single room. Finally, he made a gesture of bending his left hand and brushing his right hand through the gap. Where to pay? I have to say, the meaning of this young man's gesture is very obvious. But... Hello, I can speak Hyuxia. Hie Hie was stunned on the spot. It seems like I just babbled for others. But it's okay, no one saw it, so I avoided social death. The best thing is that I met someone who can speak Hyuxia here. You know Hyuxia? That's great. I am a dead person who ran away from the hospital. Obviously that can't be said. It seems that I have to perform again. Sure enough, if you tell one lie, you will have to cover it up with 10 lies. I'm a performance artist from Huaxia. We are practicing how long a patient can survive in this busy city with 5,000 yen. But as you can see, there is no language barrier, and not even the venerable Marina Abramovic, the mother of performance art, can save me. So, could you please take me to the cashier to book a private room, sir? The man just glanced at Hie Hie from head to toe again for some unknown reason, as if he had confirmed something. Slightly rolling up her sleeves, she was wearing a black Arceau sklet watch as expected. Looked at the time. Then he replied calmly, "Of course." Hie Hie breathed a sigh of relief, finally completing the first task. After walking for a while, to be specific, 6 turns, and 1 downstairs, the two finally reached the cashier counter. In fact, you can only truly enter this internet cafe after going downstairs. The cashier counter is quite small, only enough for 7 or 8 people to stand in it. Now there is only an old man sitting inside. I don't know whether he is taking a nap or has fallen asleep. After all, it's almost midnight now. But what is worth noting is that although this old man is hunched over, his face is always facing the cashier counter and he still seems to be smiling. If he hadn't been standing in front of the cashier counter at this moment, he could vaguely hear faint snoring. Perhaps you would think that the old man is still awake. However, the total space of this internet cafe is incredibly large, almost equivalent to a small village. The layout is almost comparable to the Der Pineapple Garden. Anyway, Hie just feels that if he doesn't live here for a few months, how can he really figure out where is which? Are you a permanent resident, for the day or the hour? Mr. Performance Artist. Hie quickly replied, well, you don't have to call me Mr. Performance Artist. Performance art also requires a sense of mystery. My name is, Hie. You can just call me by my real name. It's not that Hie is too modest, but this title really makes him feel a sense of moral condemnation. What's your name, sir? The man thought about it, and for some reason paused, then smiled and said to Hie, my name is, Zhong Jinwo. Hie has a panoramic view, do I need to think of a name? But that's normal. Do I need to list the reasons why I shouldn't tell my real name to a stranger I meet for the first time? Okay, Mr. Zhong. Could you please ask me how many days I can stay here for 5,000 yen? After listening to this, I put my left index finger behind my back and tapped the cash register lightly a few times. The old man finally woke up and his cloudy eyes slowly opened. Or maybe it was opened. Anyway, I could see the eyelids move. Then there was a conversation in Japanese. Hie didn't understand either and could only observe the expressions of the two people. But what can be done about these two people? As for the old man, his voice was hoarse and slow, and apart from his unchanged smile, one could only see his mouth shape slowly changing. However, the change was very small, as if a slightly larger arc would be a tiring task for him. As for me, I had the same expression throughout the whole process, indifferent, very indifferent. The boss said that the store is promoting a discount recently, but there is a shortage of staff to do the promotion. As long as you help him distribute 200 flyers every day, you can waive the single room usage fee for that day. It's like providing accommodation but not food. He asked if you are willing to help him. The communication between the two seemed to have ended, and he also received a piece of news that was a great surprise to him. Of course. Of course I do. Then I talked to the old man for a few more words and got a key with a golden lacquer tag hanging on it. On the lacquer tag was written, Leaf number 8, room 22. Then he handed it to Hie, here is your room key. The boss said that since you agreed, you can start tomorrow. Hie quickly took the key. Hie could completely understand these words because they were almost the same as those on Hawaii. Maybe it was really created by someone from the Su family? Before I could be happy, where is this now? So Hie could only look at Zhong Jinwo with helplessness and embarrassment. The man seemed to have expected it, but he still held his forehead with his hand. Then he started walking, raised his left hand and waved it forward. Hie, who was proficient in the art of talking and gesturing at the same time, naturally understood what it meant and quickly followed. If Hie was walking in front at this moment, perhaps he would be able to see the faint smile on Zhong Jinwo's face at this moment. After the two men left, the cashier counter returned to calm again. There was still only the old man sitting there, smiling slightly. The wheel of fortune breaks through everything and starts turning. The eternal chosen one has arrived. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man's eyes suddenly opened, and his dark green dragon pupils had already deduced everything. At this moment, something hidden deep in Hie's body and mind suddenly became inexplicably restless. Hie seemed to sense something as well, and stopped to look back the way he came. Nothing. Then just think of it as being too stressful recently. Chapter 8. Now. Shibuya Crossing, Tokyo. A hunchbacked old man carrying a box of ramen noodles suddenly stopped at the zebra crossing at Shibuya Crossing. People passed by him one after another, and he looked up at the sky for some reason at the busiest intersection in the world. There was a gleam of light in his eyes, but it quickly faded away. He stepped on the last second of the green light and returned to the crowd again. The headquarters of the 8 clans of Sheki. In a thatched hut-style courtyard next to the typical Shinmi Izukuri structure shrine, you can faintly smell the aroma of tea. A man, or an old man. Bring the teacup to your nose, close your eyes and sip it. It shows elegance and simplicity. The floating hot steam can only leave the cup mouth a few inches before disappearing quietly. But just when he was about to put the tea into his mouth, the hot steam suddenly stopped for a moment. It will neither appear nor disappear. Suddenly, the temperature in the yard became inexplicably colder. The man lowered his teacup slightly. When his eyes opened, his pupils actually flashed a dark golden red. Castle College, Chicago, IL, USA. In the 2-story building not far from Valhalla, the walls are covered with oil paintings and bookshelves that are almost high enough to touch the ceiling. On display are sets of hardcover documents and rubbings of ancient books. At this moment, the only owner of this building put away all his usual casualness and arrogance. My heart is filled with the will to fight and the desire for revenge. A person who should have died but didn't, a person who was about to die but didn't, are they finally waiting for the beginning of the end of everything? All over the world. The person who has lived the longest and experienced the world with the most real dragons, or something else. Everyone has clearly felt the warning given by the bloodline, the direction of the long river of destiny. From this moment on, there was a deviation. Mr. Zhongzhen, may I ask why this house number is called Leaf Vein No 8? He wanted to first figure out where he was. I was so depressed that he even began to regret it. Why did you tell him that you can speak Hyuxia? Along the way, He asked him countless questions, one after another. Where is this internet cafe located in Tokyo? Is there a library nearby? Where can I buy cheap clothes and food? Is Japanese difficult to learn? You know, apart from work, I hardly speak a few words a day. Now, I have finished talking about this summer, right? I had to keep telling myself in my heart, he is a performance artist. A performance artist needs to understand the environment of his experiment. I should also tell him well. Because this internet cafe is called Shuyi, it is said that the owner of this place accidentally picked up a maple leaf from the water one day, and when he was looking at it, it was suddenly blown away by the wind. The owner couldn't get rid of the pattern of the leaf, so he drew it and built this Shuyi internet cafe. Each leaf vein represents 2 rows of cells. After listening to this, He shook his head silently, indicating that he understood. Then suddenly another question occurred to me. I quickly looked at Zhong Jinwo and was about to speak. Mr. Zhong. Then. Before He asked, Zhong Zhen stood in front of a blue room on the right and spoke first. Arrive. He looked at the house number of the blue single room and it seemed that this was the one. By the way, why did Mr. Zhong seem to speak much faster when he said we've arrived just now? An illusion, right? It is said that people in this country express their gratitude by bowing. So He also bowed to Zhong Jinwo, and said sincerely, thank you so much, Mr. Zhong. I'm so sorry to have troubled you for so long. At this moment, I felt so relieved that a smile appeared on my face without me noticing. Huaxia people often say that meeting is fate. You don't need to thank me, Mr. He. We will meet again if we are destined to meet again. Well. See you again if we are lucky. Then I turned around and left, putting on my coat as I walked. It turned out to be a long black trench coat. Suddenly, he stopped again. He turned around and looked at He who was also watching him. He smiled and said to He, Mr. He, I am actually only 2 or 3 years older than you. I really don't deserve to be your gentleman. After saying that, he accelerated, turned the corner and disappeared. It was a vivid example of a teenager's successful prank. He was stunned on the spot. While taking out the key to open the door, he seemed to be muttering to himself. I saw that he was dressed very maturely, and he spoke in a very steady manner. Who knew he was so naughty? He called me by my wrong name and didn't tell me earlier. He inserted the key and turned it a few times to unlock the room, then with a little force with his left hand he pushed the sliding door open. Just as I was about to go in, I seemed to suddenly think of something and looked towards the corner where Zhong Jinwo disappeared. Mo Ming shook his head slightly. He walked slowly into the single room and after a little groping he found the pull-down chandelier switch next to the sliding door. The lights came on and the entire arrangement became visible. It is a small space of about 4 square meters. A computer, a chair, and half a single bed. In this way, it almost occupied the entire single room. But He didn't feel it was cramped. After all, He had never lived in a spacious room in his original world. At my relative's house, I naturally sleep in the smallest bedroom or directly on the sofa. The room that was finally left for him was only about 30 or 40 square meters. The kitchen was the living room, and the toilet was between the bedroom. He started to clean up, although someone should have cleaned the place roughly once. But you still have to clean up the cigarette butts in the corners, the small garbage in the computer keyboard drawer, and some hair left on the bed yourself. After some trouble, He took out his Nokia mobile phone for the elderly. There is still 1 bar of electricity? It seems that my first death was because of looking at this old phone. Without knowing that he had congenital heart disease, he saw the address book and became overly excited, which led to the onset of the disease. By the way, since I've died once, I wonder if I still have this disease in my body? In this situation, I don't seem to have any idea of the answer to the question. Beijing time is 12:39, the time difference between Japan and Huaxia is 1 hour, so the current Tokyo time should be 1:39. Is it that late already? Should I call my family and let them know I'm safe? But I am in a state of amnesia now. Our family seems to be living in a tight financial situation. This phone probably doesn't have international long-distance calling service enabled. And even if we get in touch. Before he could finish his words, Nokia's screen went black with a ding sound. Hie Hie's conflicted look was reflected on the screen. Well, you make the decision for me. This caused Hie Hie to laugh awkwardly. He rummaged in his bag again, took out a charging cable, and charged the Nokia on the charging pad next to the computer. Then he lay down on the half-single bed. Because there is air conditioning here almost all year round, there is no need to take off clothes to cool down. The main thing is that if I take off this hospital gown, I don't think I will have anything else to wear. So I have to buy a normal set of clothes. If I always wear this set of clothes when walking around, I will easily get into unnecessary trouble. By now, the hospital and Li Ruin should have discovered my fake death and amnesia. They should be looking for me by now. And although I won't have to spend money on accommodation as long as I help distribute flyers, I still have to spend money on food. How to use 5,409 yen to ensure that it lasts the longest remains a question. And language. Just now Hie Hie learned from Zhongzhen that there is a library right across the street. At least there should be a Hyuxia Japanese dictionary and a basic syllabary teaching book in the library. By the way, what exactly is the prerequisite for activating word spirit hypernuclear replication? Hie Hie lay on his back on the bed, various questions kept turning around in his mind. But I could hear a faint sound, so low that it sounded like a dream talk. Very close, very close. As he kept muttering to himself, he couldn't help but slowly close his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 9. Castle College, a conference room in the deepest part of the Hall of Heroes. Since everyone has come to this place voluntarily today, there must be only one reason. Ange sat at the end of the long oak table and looked around. Everywhere he looked, he saw old men who had not appeared in public for decades. The last time this group of people came together was to make choices that would determine the outcome of World War II. Dragon Slayer. Beowulf. This iron-blooded dragon slayer, the heir of a dragon-blooded family, and the last captain of the secret party's action team. Just saying these two words was like a gust of east wind that ignited the fighting spirit of everyone present. Gentlemen, why don't we first discuss the reason why we are gathered here? For example, which dragon king, or which creature made us old guys who don't belong to the same bloodline feel that message? No need. Since the remnants of our era can all feel it, it must be a dragon on a throne in ancient times. They will die sooner or later, right in front of me. The person who said this was Gilbert Jean Angers. Where's the kid from Gattuso's family? Why didn't he come? Frost Gattuso? That kid is still too young, and perhaps he is not qualified to feel the preview. Having said this, there was a strange silence. It's like a whale about to fall to the bottom of the sea, filled with memories. All the old people present recalled their lives related to the dragon before this moment in different ways. All of them are full of hatred. Is it finally time to start? I don't know who made the voice, but it was faintly trembling. Beowulf looked at his arms covered with fine white scales, and suddenly clenched them, causing the scales to make a crackling sound. His words were full of majesty and unquestionableness. It's finally time to begin the real era of dragon death. Snoring, game sound effects, and even the sound of typing on the keyboard. There was no rest for a single night. This is the norm in Shuyi Internet Cafe and also the norm in this world. There will always be someone who has a reason to stay up all night. But this did not affect Hie Hie's good sleep. So, I went to the cashier early in the morning and got the flyers to be distributed today. There were 2 women and 1 man sitting on the stage, or rather a little boy. He was sitting on a small stool playing PSP, and when Hie Hie looked at him, he even made a face at Hie Hie. There was a thick layer of flyers on the table, which should be Hie Hie's task for today. The old man was not there yesterday. After talking to one of the ladies who looked kinder, she said that the boss had told her about this yesterday and thanked him for his help. What? Ask Hie Hie how he talked to the kind lady? Just talk about it and show it with gestures. How did Hie Hie understand? I can only guess. Hie Hie always felt that if he continued like this, he would become a talented mime actor sooner or later. But then again, handing out flyers might be the most suitable job for Hie Hie right now. After all, most of the time, all you have to do is smile and hand the flyers to passers-by. But it is not ruled out that sometimes pedestrians will point to a service on the flyer and ask him something. What else can I do at this time? You can only point to your mouth and make a cross with your hands. At this time, the person asking the question will understand and leave. That's good too, after all, it's not the first day that I've been a mute. In about 2 or 3 hours, Hie Hie had distributed all the flyers for the day. It is worth mentioning that a large portion of the flyers I distributed were taken by people who walked out of the water leaves. There are office workers who wear cheap suits and carry leathery handbags, but are always neat and tidy. There are also young girls and young women who evenly apply fake Chanel lipstick on their lips and wear clothes that are as cool as possible. There were even beggars in tattered clothes holding steel bowls. But most of them were people wearing ordinary casual clothes, with their hands in their pockets or without any pockets. After walking out of Shui, they hesitated at the door for a moment and then left in a random direction. But they all seem to have one thing in common. There is no light in my eyes. Some people say that the internet cafes in this country hide the truth behind the prosperity. Maybe that's the case. After telling the lady at the cashier that the work was okay, in fact, he just walked to the cashier and made an okay gesture. Hie Hie came to the library opposite Shui to look for a Hyuxia Japanese dictionary and a basic 50 sounds teaching book. In fact, when Hie Hie got up this morning, he planned to look for any English-speaking teaching videos on his computer. Maybe it would be easier to communicate in English with people from a country where English is also a compulsory subject for the college entrance examination and the senior high school entrance examination. He was the long-term holder of the title of top student in the school in junior high and high school. The English listening score was only 28.5 and 30, and the total score was never lower than 140. If you let him listen to others speak English, he could totally understand. But the problem is, if you let him speak, that's just like listening to dumb rap. However, this idea failed in an instant. Open Google Chrome and want to type English speaking. What popped up from the input method was a bunch of Japanese words that I had no idea what they meant. So, it seems I still have to start with Japanese. After searching for a while, I finally found these 2 books. After asking with superb sign language, I found out that I could only look at it but not borrow it. So Hie Hie had to find a seat in the library where there were fewer people. While learning the 50 sounds, learn some commonly used sentences according to the Hyuxia Japanese dictionary. When I'm hungry, I go back to Shui and have a bowl of instant noodles, 105 yen a bowl. For Hie Hie now, it is also a considerable expense. After eating, I came back to continue studying. I originally planned to tear out a few unused pages from the diary in my bag to record some difficult points and pronunciation tips. But when I took it out, I found that it was a locked diary with a 4-digit password. Hie Hie couldn't help but think of his brother and smiled from the bottom of his heart. Could it be that the diary contains the Edict of Sin from the middle school years? So I had to spend 90 yen to buy a notebook at the library. So Hie Hie spent the first day in the library until the library was closed and cleared out. It's 9:01 Beijing time, which means it's 10:01 Tokyo time. Time flies. Hie Hie stood outside the library, took out Nokia to check the time, then patted the notebook in his hand and breathed a sigh of relief. It's good to have some gains. Then he began to walk slowly, but not towards Shui Internet Cafe. It's not that I'm going anywhere, I'm just walking in a random direction. He wanted to practice his Japanese pronunciation some more. If I go back to the single room to practice, it might affect others. I have to say that the sound insulation of the 2 single rooms is almost non-existent. The snoring sound that I clearly heard last night was evidence of this. Kong, Kong bang. Hie Hie lowered his head and looked at the pronunciation marked in the notebook, reading the pinyin awkwardly. It's just this sentence that I always feel doesn't read smoothly. Good evening. Such a sound came from somewhere, and Hie Hie was like a gentle rain. He suddenly realized and looked up. Dear dear. Good evening. Good evening, Hie Hie-kun. Isn't this my true self? At this moment, he still had that indifferent expression, calm and unperturbed. Hie Hie was a little surprised. Zhongxian. Zhongxian me? What a coincidence, did you just come out of Shui? Because I am still dressed exactly the same as I was yesterday, even the cuffs of my sleeves seem to be still in the same place. After listening to Zhongxian, I wonder if I heard the 2 words Zhongxian. that he almost couldn't hold back. The faint smile appeared on his face again. It was like one person was asking him to laugh, while the other was trying desperately to suppress that laugh. His mouth seemed to be shaking into waves at this moment. No, I'm just about to go now. You're going now? Is this your daily schedule? Because it seemed like you were also in the water leaves at this time yesterday. After all, Hie finally met his savior Zhong Jinwo there at nearly 12 o'clock yesterday. You could say that whenever I have free time, I will go to Shuyi to practice a game at this time. Is there anyone you want to beat at this game? No, it's just to maintain the image of a strong and reliable brother in someone's heart. Chapter 10. In order to be a strong and reliable brother. Hie inexplicably repeated this sentence in a low voice like a messenger from God. In a trance, the promise I made with him suddenly rang in my ears again. From now on, I am the elder brother, and the elder brother is me. I really didn't hear clearly what Hie said. Just seeing that he was suddenly stunned, he patted his right shoulder. Hie Jun, what's wrong with you? Hie then came to his senses. Ah, it's okay. I just thought of my brother after hearing what you said. Is that so? Then I guess there must be a deep bond between you two. As I spoke, Zhong Zhen walked towards Shui Yat, with a deep look in my eyes. Yeah, it's really deep. After all, he and I are two souls that belong to one. Even though he has now left this world forever. After that, the two of them walked slowly towards Shui Yi side by side. There was no speech during this time. At this moment, the two boys, who were obviously not very old, seemed to be already 100 years old, and their eyes were full of lovesickness. Until it enters the water leaves. I went directly into the red private room instead of going to the checkout counter to open a random private room. If this is a privilege for old customers, then this store is really thoughtful. However, this is not the case. He had already bought the single room outright. Sometimes he comes once every 1 or 2 days, and sometimes he isn't seen for 3 or 5 days. The specific time of arrival is not fixed every day, but the departure time is almost never later than 12 o'clock. One time, the lady at the cashier counter met him and asked him this question. He just replied, "It's too late, someone will care and not sleep." Except yesterday, of course. When he returned, it was almost 1 o'clock. However, it is quite rare for him to come to Shuyi for 2 consecutive nights. The two said goodbye and went to their own rooms. Zhong Zhen and I are on the first floor, and Hie's are on the basement floor. Hie walked down the stairs, staring blankly at the steps, but his mind had already drifted away. Now what we need to do is basically clear, learn Japanese daily expressions and sentences that we might use as soon as possible. But, how long will it take to learn this? What he lacks most at this moment is time. Thinking of this, I felt inexplicably restless. Hie knew very well that he couldn't disappear for too long, and he couldn't disappear for long. After making that promise, he felt that he shouldn't disappear for too long. 10 days. Hie suddenly raised his head with a firm look in his eyes. Within 10 days, I must accomplish the purpose of being here. This is going too slowly. Seems to have an idea. First, let's understand the basic situation of the 8 snake clans. Hie suddenly turned around and quickly walked up the stairs again, returning to the first floor. Knocked on the red door of the single room. To be honest, I didn't tell him which room I was going to before I said goodbye. But Hie still knocked on the door resolutely. The reason is simple. After all, I didn't go to the cashier to pay, but went directly into the leaf veins on the first floor. If he wasn't lost like Hie before, then he could only go to the old place. After a while, the sliding door slowly opened. It's really my true self inside. Mr. Zhong, I didn't call you wrong this time. I have some questions that I hope I can ask you. Hie looked at me seriously, just like a student looking at his teacher. When I saw Zhong Zhen, I just made way for Hie and said lightly. Come in and ask. If I know, I won't hide it. Hie walked in slowly. The room inside was the same size as his own. But the difference is that there is no computer or desk here. The place where these two items were originally located was replaced by an arcade machine. I win, Q. The character standing on the right, wearing a white forehead protector and with brown hair parted in the middle, is raising his right fist to make the announcement. The character on the left with white hair, white pants and a naked upper body has already fallen to the ground. The King of Fighters, this scene looks like a classic scene of a brave man defeating a demon king, Right. I asked Hie Hie to sit on the half-single bed, and I slowly sat back in the chair. Hie Hie was seen looking at the screen on the arcade machine and said this as if it was a joke. However, Hie Hie just smiled and did not answer the question. Then I asked about the background settings of the two characters. I naturally told him the truth. After Hie Hie heard this, he stopped asking questions. The one holding high the victory gesture is a passionate young man, determined to fight against evil. And what fell was a being once known as the Will of the Earth, which had watched over mankind since the creation of the world. But since humans separated from nature, he has become a symbol of evil to humans. A monster, a powerful one would threaten them all. And the monsters that never threatened them. Then in the end, the righteous and passionate young man will naturally win. Destined victory. Even after victory, they may not even know the name of the monster they killed. At this moment, Hie Hie suddenly stood up. A strong sense of unwillingness in his heart drove him to the arcade machine. With drooping eyebrows and expressionless face, he turned his head to look at Zhong Jinwo and said slowly, "Mr. Zhong, I'm very sorry, but before asking you a question, can I play a round of this game first? Just one round, and I will choose this character to fall." There was coldness in his words. After hearing Hie Hie's sudden request, I agreed immediately. There was even an inexplicable gleam in his eyes. "Let me play a round with you, and I'll choose the other one." So Hie Hie figured it out on his own and chose this character with white hair, white pants and a bare upper body. After getting familiar with the joystick and buttons, I entered the game directly. This is Hie Hie's first time playing this game and this character. In fact, this was actually his first time playing the game. After entering the game, Zhong Zhen's character is on the right and Hie Hie's character is on the left. At the beginning of the round, the opponent jumped high and rushed over, but was knocked down from the air by Hie Hie with an upper kick. Before he landed on the ground, he was kicked twice again, and then there was a brief gap where he could not attack. Hie Hie retreated decisively. However, the other person also immediately approached Hie Hie and shouted, "Here comes the 14th day." Then followed a series of combos with fire. However, Hie Hie, after being hit, only had 2 levels of health left. But his hands seemed to be pressing buttons randomly and swiping the joystick. Sure enough, Hie Hie soon only had the last level of health left, while his opponent still had 4 levels. Apart from the occasional skills that happened to hit the opponent, it seemed like he was just getting beaten. Is defeat inevitable? At this time, the opponent used a high jump kick to fly towards Hie Hie. If this kick hits, then any subsequent combo will kill Hie Hie directly. However, at the moment when the opponent was about to mention him, Hie Hie stepped back slightly, and then swept his thigh upwards. The true self was hit in the air. He immediately lost his fighting posture and fell down. But this attack only took away 1/10 of the opponent's blood. If we let it stand up again, then the ending can basically be written from there. Then, just make him unable to stand up. At the moment when Zhong Jinwo was about to fall, several light blue beams suddenly rushed up from under his feet, piercing through his body. He continued to fly away. Then he followed it up with an upward sweep kick, and before it landed, a beam of light swept across. When a brief gap occurs when there is no attack, I really want to block or charge. Hie Hie then used several layers of white balls in the center, and the energy waves wrapped in the black light wall shook them back to the wall. Then follow up with a beam of light to knock it away. This combo continued endlessly until the passionate young man who loved me was lying on the ground. And what is still standing is the evil monster. You kept pressing buttons randomly to find a combo, and you kept getting hit to accumulate enough rage to control me to death. Zhong Zhen analyzed Hie Hie's tactics with an embarrassed look on my face. Then he seemed to think of someone and gave a bitter smile. Is this what they call a genius? At home, I am at least recognized as the best. I wonder how he would react if he knew that I was defeated by someone who was playing for the first time. And Hie Hie just replied calmly. Don't worry about it, Mr. Zhong. It was just an accident. But a certain belief in my heart is growing stronger. Should monsters be killed? I don't know. But if even her is to be held hostage by that so-called justice, then I will have no choice but to kill all that justice. Chapter 11. Then, Mr. Hie Hie, let's get to the point. I took off my coat, folded it and put it on the arcade machine. Sit upright, waiting for Hie Hie's question. Hie Hie also sat back on the bed and lowered his head to think for a while. It seems to be organizing language. Mr. Zhong, do you know the 8 Snake Clan? I actually smiled slightly and drank a sip of the clear leaf tea specially provided by Hie Hie. It seemed like I heard something very funny. Genji Heavy Industries, Ganliu Research Institute, and Maruyama Construction, 3 leading companies that almost monopolize related industries in Japan and even the world, were all founded by the Snake 8 families. And he is also the helmsman of the entire Japanese underworld. It can be said that this is known to Tokyo and even the whole country. It has a huge impact on the world. He said this as if trying to restrain himself. The palm of the hand that was holding the armrest of the chair seemed to be so strong that the bones were clearly visible on the back of the hand. From Hie Hie's point of view, when I said this, my tone became more and more excited. The smile on his face became more and more like pride. At the same time, this also made Hie Hie come up with a bold guess. Mr. Zhong, are you from the Sheki 8 clan? After asking Hie Hie, even he himself seemed to think it was unlikely. He touched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly, ahaha, there is no such coincidence in the world. Sorry for asking a stupid question. However, I was a little shocked, then I lowered my brows and took a few sips of green leaf tea. Hie Hie didn't know what he meant, so she just waited for him to finish drinking. I just watched Zhongzhen finish the drink slowly. The 2 corners of the Confucian porcelain teacup's base gently touched the table. I looked up in response. There is neither wind or rain, nor sunshine, or cloudy, between the brows. Exactly. Moreover, he is the weakest one among the 10,000 people of the 8 clans of Sheki. The weakest one. Hie Hie always found it hard to believe such words. Because the man in front of him had a temperament in his clothes and a murderous look in his brow that could not be hidden at all. All of them show that he is definitely not ordinary. After I said that smile suddenly appeared on my face again. That's right, it was the same smile that looked like he was ready to watch the fun when he slipped away last night. When Hie Hie saw it, he immediately felt an ominous premonition in his heart. Speaking of which, I heard that among the 8 families of Sheki, the Fengmo family, except for the family head, has recently offered a large sum of money to look for someone. At this point, I tried to hide my guilt by ignoring the hospital gown that Hie Hie was still wearing because he had no money to buy clothes. It is said that a friend of an important person disappeared from Shuntendo Hospital due to faked death and amnesia. Hie Hie's heart almost jumped out of his chest when he heard this. Because my true self can be heard in just a few words. First, you are already being hunted down. Second, the people who were chasing him were the powerful Fuma family, one of the 8 snake families, who specialized in training hired ninjas and killer ninjas. Third, it seems that I have a friend with a very powerful background, who has mobilized all the ninjas except the head of the Fuma family to find me, and it seems that I have even less time. And the most fatal point is, at this moment, sitting in front of him is a person from the Sheki 8 families who knows about this matter. How can it be described with just one word? Bad luck. Is that so? That important person is really loyal and righteous. Hie Hie just has one feeling at this moment. Sitting on pins and needles. Indeed, he is a very kind and righteous person. I just wonder what the person who is standing in front of me right now thinks. Hie Hie's expression suddenly became serious. The worst situation had already happened. Could it be that the man in front of him at this moment is here to arrest him? Wouldn't that be like walking into a trap yourself? When did he discover it? Then why hasn't he done anything yet? Could it be that they haven't confirmed it's me yet? Should I run away? Hie Hie looked at Zhong Jinwo with a forced smile, trying to suppress the trembling in his tone. He looked around as if to deceive himself. Try to say it in a joking tone. Mr. Zhong, aren't we just you and me here? Stop joking. But to my heart's content, it was as if I didn't hear what Hie Hie said at all. He continued, it is said that when the amnesiac friend of that important person disappeared from the hospital, the question he kept asking along the way was, who am I? And the name given by that important person. Having said that, Zhong Zhenai slowly stood up and walked to Hie Hie. His expression was stern and indifferent, and his voice was as low as a whisper. It's Hie Hie. That's it, General. Hie Hie said nothing, and even his expression did not change. But I felt extremely regretful in my heart. He actually said his own name. It's useless to regret now. Now is the time to start planning your escape. With his current strength, oh no, he has no strength at all now. Although there are 2 skills that sound powerful, infinite rebirth and supercore replication. But one is a passive skill. 1. It's not even clear how to activate it. The fighting power of an ordinary person is compared to the true self in front of him, who is obviously not an ordinary person. Isn't that equivalent to having no fighting power? The man in front of me might even have the power of words, even though he claimed that he was the weakest of the 8 snake clans. But the strength and oppression engraved in their bones are self-evident. Hie Hie couldn't help but glance at the red sliding door out of the corner of his eye. With the distance between him and my true self, he should be able to escape out the door first. But when he turned his gaze back to look at Zhong Zhenwo, but all I could see was a look of amusement and insight on Zhong Zhen's face. Hie Yu Jun, if I were you, I would never think of running away. Because, you will never be faster than me. Hie Hie was discovered instantly at first sight. This is clear from what he said. He is indeed very strong, and with my ordinary physical fitness, I will never be faster than him. It seems like the future is set. But one question still lingers in Hie Hie's mind. Moreover, this doubt seems to be the key. Mr. Zhong, since you already know it's me, why haven't you made a move yet? If it's for that huge sum of money, wouldn't it be more reassuring if we got it in our hands sooner? Hie Hie was like a trapped beast, trying to grasp any possibility. I feel like I've been hit on a sore spot. The playful look suddenly disappeared. Instead, there was a bone-chilling chill. It even makes people feel that there are wind-blade swordsmen. His face was dark and full of evil, staring at Hie Hie blankly. However, Hie Hie did not dodge or evade, his expression did not change at all, and he just looked straight into Zhong Zhen's eyes. The air around seemed to suddenly stagnate and freeze. Extremely depressing. Puff. In such an atmosphere, such a voice was suddenly heard. Ha 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 ha, sorry, I really can't hold it in anymore. I suddenly laughed out loud. It was that kind of laughter from a young man who had successfully played a prank. Hie Hie's face was filled with confusion. I laughed for quite a while before I could stop. Oh, sorry. I was just acting. I don't know why, but I always feel inexplicably happy teasing you. Hie Hie's face turned black and he was a little confused. What the hell is going on? Are all the people from the 8 snake clans so naughty? I adjusted myself and gradually returned to my indifferent expression. But the smile on the corner of his mouth took a long time to fade away. But, Hie Yu Jun, everything I just said is true. Right now, basically all of Tokyo, both the black and white worlds, have received a huge reward for finding you. Specific content: bring yourself to Shuntendo Hospital unharmed and you will get it. 100,000 US dollars. This surprised Hie Hie. 100,000 US dollars. Equivalent to about 600,000 RMB. What kind of friend would spend such a huge amount of money just to find me? Could it be? Chapter 12. Could it be Li Ruyan? Hie Hie looked at Zhong Zhenwo, hoping to get an answer. He didn't know what to do. To be honest, if he hadn't still remembered Li Ruyan's crying when he was dying, he just thought that this was just an ordinary high school teenager. He is not he. And ever since he entered that golden door, the Hie Hie that Li Ruyan saw would never be him again. Li Ruyan is a fragile and sensitive person. But this is also his unforgettable concern. I thought about it carefully for a few breaths. It seems, his last name is Li. As for his specific name, I don't know either. I just heard these things by chance. Yet, Hie Hie felt extremely complicated at this moment. How should I face Li Ruyan in the future? I looked at Hie Hie and saw that his brows were furrowed and his eyes were dim and I couldn't tell what expression he had. I couldn't help but sigh. I just heard about this morning, and I immediately guessed it was you. But what I don't understand is, if you faked your death and came back to life, why did you pretend to have amnesia? And the Hie Hie I saw these past 2 days doesn't look like he's just recovered from a serious illness. It's like, you're really not the same Hie Hie as before. The last sentence sounded like thunder in Hie Hie's ears. However, I slowly sat back in my chair and said something with a smile. It's just a joke. I sat down and looked up, thinking I could see Hie Hie's embarrassed expression again. But Hie Hie just tilted his head back with a nice smile on his face. Mr. Zhong, do you want to hear a story from me? Without waiting for me to speak, he started talking to himself. Once upon a time, in a world far away, there was a little boy whose parents died in a fire. When he walked to the door of his former home, the sound of people, water spray, and flames burning and exploding all seemed much louder than his cries. It even made him feel that the world was so crowded everywhere. It's just the right amount of crowded. There's only one more person. So, he stopped talking. How jarring the sound itself was to him, how cheap conversation was to him. The world is so boring. At this point, it seemed as if thousands of shooting stars suddenly flew through Hie Hie's eyes. Starting from the land of hope, carrying light, falling towards darkness. Until he met a little girl. That little girl had never seen the world. Some people said that she was destined to have nothing to do with that world from the moment she was born. A person who is born out of this world. Extra people. When the little boy met her, he felt like they were. They are all children abandoned by the world. But gradually, he found out that he was wrong. The little girl never hated the world. Even if she was expelled, she always wanted to get closer to it. She never speaks, everything she says is the king's order, and no one dares to disobey. She could have gotten everything she wanted with this. But she doesn't want to get it this way, and she doesn't want to hurt others because of it. The little boy then realized that she was nothing like him. How much he wanted to protect her like this. How much he wanted to save her like this. But the princess will always have her prince. The prince took her into the world. Take her traveling, take her shopping, take her to do many things she has ever wanted to do. He thinks this is fine. She's happy, isn't she? Until Hie Hie seemed to suddenly recall something extremely sad and helpless. His eyes were filled with sadness and an indescribable resentment. Until the person who drove the little girl out of the world actually wanted to kill her for some power in her. And her prince is caught up in his own hesitation. Until the little girl was killed, the prince decided to become a demon king. And the little boy just watched. He could only watch. It was just like standing in front of that house that was gradually being devoured by the flames, feeling helpless and sad. The story should have ended there. But if we could go back in time, what do you think that little boy would do? After Hie Hie finished speaking, he looked at Zhong Jinwo with a resolute and clear expression. I didn't hesitate at all and answered firmly. Of course I will risk my life to save that girl. Will I become a demon king or be expelled from the world? Could it be that it is more important than my own feelings? This sounded like a response to Hie Hie, but also like he was talking to himself. After a while, his face was serious and worried again. But it seems that the problem is not for Hie Hie, but for the little girl in the story. Hie Jun, what you said. Before he could finish his words, the red sliding door was knocked away with a bang by a burly figure. And without stopping, he went straight towards the door and crashed into me. Everything happened too suddenly. It was not until I was knocked out of the single room and the sound of the collision was still ringing outside that Hie Hie came to his senses. His face was full of horror and confusion. Hie Hie quickly looked along the route where the collision had taken place. I saw a person covered with dark green scales, nearly 3 meters tall, with muscles and bones bulging like a water snake. More like a lizard. He was still roaring and pressing against my chest as he rushed further away. Hie Hie saw it without any fear. Compared with the oppressive force of the golden dragon pupil, it is simply not in the same dimension. Could this be Deadpool? No. No, this is completely different from the description in the book. Deadpool should have a half-snake body with scales, cry like a baby, and is definitely not this big. Hie Hie looked solemn, thinking quickly in his mind, and after calming down, he began to grasp the wrongness. Moreover, can Deadpool crash through several walls in a row, firmly lock Yuan Ji's hung, and appear here silently? Impossible, but now is not the time to think about this, because in Hie Hie's opinion, if I were hit like that a few more times, there might not even be a few intact bones left. So Hie Hie quickly looked around to see if there was anything useful. I saw a mark under the arcade machine that looked like an animal's paw print. The silver stamp suitcase was firmly pressed underneath. Hie Hie quickly lifted up the arcade machine and pulled out the briefcase. If Hie Hie guessed correctly, this must be the weapon they need most at the moment. Because the people from the 8 clans of Sheki wouldn't always carry a suitcase around with them for no reason. Hie Hie quickly put the suitcase on the ground and straightened it. Fortunately, this is not a special box with a combination lock. Just slide the 2 inverted buckles on the left and right to open it easily. But when the box was opened, Hie Hie's mind suddenly went blank. Inside was the spider cut, which was said to have killed a spider spirit and was named after the inscription "The evil spirit lurks at night in Spider Mountain." And the one with the same name, the 5 swords of the world, who is said to have killed Shutenduji, Dijikiri Angong. And in this world, the only one who can possess both of these swords is Minamoto Wakeo. It turned out that Yuan Jizheng, the person who had helped me achieve my goal after working so hard for so long, was right next to me. Bang! Suddenly there was another loud noise. Hie Hie looked up and saw that Deadpool and Zhong Jinwo, no, and Yuan Jizheng had already hit a wall that seemed thicker. Although at this time there were sounds of fear and crying all around. But the only good thing now is that there is no one in the single room where the car crashed to the bottom. Yuan Jizheng had already stabilized his body at this moment, with his feet on the wall and his arms curled up in front of his chest. He was struggling with the Deadpool with brute force, and blood was already flowing from the corners of his mouth. Hie Hie quickly shook his head, indicating that the most important thing for him at the moment was to solve this situation. Hie Hie picked up the spider cut with the scabbard in his left hand, and directly pulled out the blade of the boy cut with his right hand. Facing the man and the beast who were still in confrontation. His legs were bent, his muscles bulged and burst, and his palms were holding the tongziki. In an instant, it was ejected like a cannonball. At this moment, in order to confront the inexplicable attack in front of him, Zhen Kaizheng held up his chest, making it impossible for him to take a breath and activate the power of words. Deadpool was almost exhausted. My vision became a little blurry. However, it was clear that behind the Deadpool, there was a not very tall figure. He actually ran towards him with two sharp swords shining with holy light. He jumped up, held the sword in his right hand backwards, and thrust it downwards suddenly. It actually pierced directly into the chest of the Deadpool in front of him. It even penetrated through and appeared before his eyes. Isn't this exactly the boy who angrily killed Shutten? Chapter 13. Dia. Deadpool seemed to be hit in a sore spot and roared loudly. But the sound it made was not human. The two claws that were pressing against Yuan Zisheng's chest suddenly lost their strength for a moment. The iron tower-like scaly body also staggered slightly. He seized that moment, and almost exhausted all his strength, gathered it between his arms, and pushed hard. Deadpool was actually pushed back 2 steps. Only then was Yuan Jizheng able to fall to the ground. Without stopping, he quickly used Deadpool's right leg to slide. In a flash, he squatted on one leg and stood 7 meters away, breathing the air greedily in big gulps. Upon seeing this, Hie Hie immediately gave up on inserting the boy's pea into the dragon servant's body. With the help of its back, he jumped away. At this moment, green blood began to seep out of the dragon servant's mouth full of sharp teeth. But this did not affect the murderous intent and brutality in his eyes at all. I saw him raising his head and roaring angrily. His bones and muscles, which seemed like they were about to burst, actually burst out of his body. It's like Tu Sheng is wearing a set of bone armor, attached to every inch of Deadpool's skin. Yuan Jizheng took several deep breaths before he was able to adjust himself and quickly analyzed the extent of his physical injuries. The sudden and violent impact from this super powerful Deadpool almost broke his sternum. Even breathing is a great pain every time. Not to mention forcing the dragon bone state to open. The use and power of the word spirit may also be greatly reduced as a result. Seeing such a change, my heart sank, thinking to myself that this was terrible. It's transforming. The scales suddenly grew wildly at this moment, squeezing each other and making a cracking sound. Even Hie Hie and Yuan Jizheng, who were far away from him at the moment, could hear the sound of his bones and muscles stretching and colliding. Even the dojigiri that was inserted into Deadpool began to pull out of his body inch by inch. Bang bang bang! Hie Hie only felt 3 extremely fine and fast gusts of wind whistling past his ears. 3 sparks flying like fireworks appeared one after another on the muscles and bones that Deadpool had already grown in front of him. However, Deadpool didn't move at all, even his dark green eyes didn't change at all. Until 3 bullets with flat front ends fell to the ground. Ding 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 3 times. Hie Hie then realized that 3 bullets whizzed past his ears. Hie Hie looked in the direction of the sound. At this time, a big man with a face full of flesh and patterns on both arms was standing in front of the gate. He was wearing a security guard's uniform, and his outfit looked extremely asymmetrical. The big man was holding the gun with both hands, with a wisp of smoke coming out of the muzzle. His legs were bent into an H shape due to trembling, and his face was covered with sweat as if it was raining. He seemed to want to say something, but his mouth was trembling so much that he couldn't utter a complete sentence. The saliva was flying all over the place. Come to think of it, Hie Hie did notice that there seemed to be such a person in a small pavilion on the right before Shui Ye entered the door. But basically every time Hie Hie looked over, this person was lying down and sleeping. It seems like this is an extremely difficult job. By the way, do security guards in Japan need to carry guns? But at the moment, I don't seem to have the energy to care about the security issue. But the muscle armor that the Deadpool in front of him has grown can actually completely resist bullets. This is the most shocking question at this moment. If it were allowed to complete its transformation, how powerful would it become? Maybe Hie Hie should have been afraid. The fear of being a normal person. But I don't know where this sense of heroism comes from. He somehow felt that this was his first battle to prove his beliefs. If you can't even suppress a Deadpool, how can you expect to shatter fate? Hie Hie mobilized all his strength and put one leg on the ground. Both legs are slightly bent and tensed, ready to go. Then he placed the spider blade with the scabbard still in his left hand against the ground, and then pushed it hard towards Yuan Jisheng, who had just rested. Yuan Jisheng just stretched out his right hand downwards and caught the spider cut that was sliding accurately towards him. Then he looked at Hie Hie, his face full of urgency and admonition, wanting to say something. But I only saw Hie Hie running towards Deadpool quickly. Even though there was still cold sweat on his forehead. But a smile on the corner of his mouth rose to the edge of his cheek, showing his extreme joy and pride. Declare it loudly. This is the first step that little boy must take. Yuan Jisheng was just confused at first. The Deadpool in front of him, no, the one who was about to transform into a stronger being, was obviously coming for him. But this guy who he had just met for less than 2 days and whose behavior was strange, stabbed Deadpool like a god. It can be said that he directly saved his life. But when he heard what Hie Hie said, he inexplicably felt. Isn't that the way it should be? Isn't that the way it should be? What an interesting guy. Let's kill him together. As Yuan Jisheng thought about it, he couldn't help but smile the same as Hie Hie. He held the scabbard in his left hand and stood in front of him. He suddenly grasped the hilt with his right hand and slowly pulled out 1/10 of the blade. Then he pulled it all out suddenly. As the blade passed through the scabbard, a clang sound was heard, and it instantly spread in the air for countless miles. As for the man holding the knife, he was now within 3 feet of the enemy. When Deadpool saw that the two were not far away from him, a sense of fear suddenly appeared in his dark green pupils. He didn't have time to pull out the tongziki, and the transformation was interrupted. It seems that he was hurt a lot. He quickly tore and grabbed a piece of the door panel and swept it across in front of him. The door collided with the air and made a sound of breaking wind. If anyone is even slightly hit, he will be seriously injured. But the two of them were obviously faster than this move. Hie Hie lowered his head slightly, and using the speed brought by his running just now, he leaned over and slid through the wind-breaking force and came behind the half-dragon guard. But Yuan Jisheng was even faster. He jumped high and stabbed Deadpool's neck twice. But even he is the grandmaster of ancient Japanese swordsmanship. The 2 strikes directly cut off the scales on the neck, leaving 2 cuts on Deadpool's body that were by no means negligible. After making the 2 slashes, Yuan Jisheng stepped on Deadpool's chest, using the force to leap back and create some distance between him. Deadpool stretched out his left hand to grab it, but he was just barely able to touch it. This provoked him to throw the door directly towards Yuan Jisheng. However, Yuan Jisheng still dodged the attack by just slightly turning sideways. But at this moment, his heart was far from being so calm. He has been thinking about possible solutions to victory. He knew very well that with his current physical condition, if he used the word spirit just once, he would immediately become exhausted and unable to move. After all, his own spiritual words, royal power itself has such a flaw. Yuan Jisheng was actually holding back a mouthful of blood in his throat at this moment. At the beginning, the sneak attack from the half-dragon guard almost broke several of his sternums. Therefore, given my current state, I am not sure whether I can use the royal power to its full effect. Even if he used the full peak of his royal power, if he still couldn't kill him, then after he lost his combat effectiveness, he and Hie Hie. Death is certain. Hie Hie is only human after all. Just as Yuan Jisheng was hesitating, the human body of Hie Hie jumped high. The fragmentary light of the broken neon lights now shone on Hie Hie's body, as if reflecting a kaleidoscope of the world. There are countless possibilities in the tube. Yuan Jisheng actually felt a strange fear for a moment. Hie Hie was seen lying steadily on Deadpool's back. He held tightly to the tongzikir that was still stuck in his back with both hands and shouted loudly. Now! When Yuan Jisheng heard the shout, he seemed to be driven by destiny. He suddenly opened his arms and stared at the half-dragon guard. Word spirit royal power. Hie Hie clearly didn't say now. But he just felt that he should do it. As the 4 words came out of Yuan Zisheng's mouth, the dead pool seemed to be suddenly crushed by a huge rock. Even his legs, which were as muscular as obsidian, were trembling. An extremely strong force forced him to kneel down, it was even instinctive, constantly urging him to kneel. But he seemed unwilling to do so, and began to rush around with all his might. And Hie Hie behind him still held on to the handle of Tong Ziki's knife tightly and kept pressing down. Deadpool felt so much pain that he wanted to reach out and grab Hie Hie on his back. But under the influence of royal power, even raising his hand is a problem for him. In fact, with his muscles so developed at this moment, even if he stretched out his hands to grab it, he would not be able to touch the latissimus dorsi. Suddenly, he seemed to have awakened the wisdom of some strong humans. The cloudiness in his eyes seemed to dissipate slightly. Retreat step by step towards the wall behind. Yuan Zhizheng had a bad feeling in his heart. But even though he put all his heart and soul into activating the spirit of words, blood was already dripping from the corners of his mouth. It was also difficult for him to suppress the half-dragon guard any further. Hie Hie could probably sense what he wanted to do. But he must not let go now. If he lets go at this moment, not only will all his previous efforts be wasted, but he will also surely die. Naturally, since he has unlimited rebirths, he is not afraid of this. However, after using the royal power, Yuan Zhizheng is now powerless and it is impossible for him to escape. He doesn't have this ability. So as expected. Puff. He only felt a sweet taste in his throat, and a mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, sticking to the boy's sword and flowing on the sword body that was shining with sword light. Chapter 14. When Yuan Zhizheng saw this situation, his heart trembled. He wanted to put down his arms and cut the spider. If we fight head-on with swords, perhaps we can still gain a glimmer of hope. It's much better than continuing to do this useless thing here. Don't move. Hie Hie lowered his head so that his face could not be seen, and his back rose and fell rapidly, showing that he was breathing heavily. His toes and right knee were still firmly pressed against Deadpool's back. There was still sticky red blood dripping down from the corner of his mouth. It fell on Hie Hie's hands, which were already trembling slightly. Deadpool slowly moved forward a few steps, then began to retreat, as if he wanted to try again. The green blood that kept oozing out of the sword on his back made him almost crazy. But it can be seen from the low roar that he gasps for breath every time he takes a step. He is like a candle in the wind, about to fall. Hie Hie then raised his head. A defiant smile, as confident and proud as a saker falcon swooping down upon its prey. There was blood stains all over his mouth. Just like a killer with a strong fighting spirit. Don't move, keep going. Yuan Zhizheng paused after hearing this. What Hie Hie said at this moment was like a magic sound, low and extremely magnetic. Just as the imperial power is coming, inducing the masses to submit. Deadpool has now reached the same position in front of the wall. The body first leaned forward slightly, and all the muscles in the body were wriggling and trembling. It seemed to be accumulating strength just to use this collision to crush the bug on its back into meat paste. Roar! With a roar from the half-dragon guard, his giant body crashed into the high wall behind him. It even knocked a concave hole in the wall. The cracks continued to spread along the center of the gap. It quickly extended to the entire high wall. Time and space seemed to have stopped. Deadpool in front of Yuan Zhizheng still stood tall. But no sound from Hie Hie was heard again. It was dead silent. The surroundings were so quiet that it seemed as if we were not in this busy city. Ka ka ka. Suddenly, in this almost suffocating stagnation, the sound started slowly, but the frequency increased rapidly. It is like a round mirror that gradually breaks from one point until no human figure can be seen on the mirror surface anymore, and it starts to break into pieces. The moment it hit the ground, it shattered into silver-white mirror flowers. Just like the high wall behind Deadpool at this moment. Crack, 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 bang. With each sound, countless smoke and dust burst out from the cracks in the wall. Until a piece of debris popped out of the wall from the gap. The entire high wall was broken into pieces and immediately fell down like dominoes. The smoke and dust billowed. Yuan Zhizheng looked at the scene in front of him and finally put his hands down. He held the spider cutter's hand tightly against the knife handle and pressed it against the ground, feeling completely hopeless. However, as the head of the Yuan family, one of the 8 families in Sheki, and the youngest director of the executive bureau, his pride made him still look ahead with pride. But the sadness and unwillingness in his eyes could not be hidden. It's a pity that I didn't get to know Hie Hie better. He was such a brave man who was worth making friends with. Unwilling to fail in his revenge, he would even die here. The strength disappeared like smoke. He almost lost the strength to keep his body steady. Bang! At this moment, it sounded like another heavy object collapsing. The smoke and dust that had been gradually dissipating in front of him was carried by the wind pressure generated by the collapse of heavy objects, and instantly rushed towards Yuan Zhizheng. This may be the last straw that breaks the camel's back for the giant tortoise. Yuan Zhizheng was blown away by the wind. The taut thread in my mind suddenly broke. The whole body fell down like a stone tablet. There is a longing between the eyelids like the sun and the moon, eager to get closer, yet always just a moment away. Yuan Zhizheng struggled not to close his eyes, because he seemed to have not seen Hie Hie since before the wall collapsed. Even if he's dead, you still have to see the body. Maybe, there will be a miracle? It's really a miracle. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. A figure gradually emerged in Yuan Zhizheng's hazy vision. It looked like a dream in the smoke and dust. Not until the real person was standing beside him did Yuan Zhizheng dare to completely believe what he had seen, which he thought was just a dream. Hie Jun. But before he could say anything, he fainted with a smile on his lips. It is detected that the trust level of the otherworldly character Yuan Zhizheng in the Chosen One has reached complete trust. The existence of the word spirit of the otherworldly character Zhen Shize has been detected. Kingship meet the conditions for using word spirit super core copy as Hie Hie's body flashed with golden light. Word spirit, super core copy was activated successfully. The word spirit, kingship has been super copied. Hie Hie stood beside Yuan Zhizheng, an indescribable joy flowing through his whole body. Even at this moment his left hand had been crushed into pieces. Blood kept gushing out from the throat and neck, and every time he coughed, a bright red liquid spurted out. Blood was slowly flowing out from somewhere on his head, flowing onto his face, and dripping down beside Yuan Zhizheng. That's great! That's great! Mumbling and mumbling. Hie Hie fell directly beside Yuan Zhizheng, no longer breathing. Confirmed that the Chosen One has no vital signs. It has been detected that the body of the Chosen One has been completely destroyed. Details show that it was burned by ultra-high temperature flames. The body of the Chosen One will now be reconstructed. Construction completed. Safe rebirth location, Waterleaf Internet Cafe, Leaf Vein number 8, Single Room number 22. The abilities gained by the Chosen One after body reconstruction still exist. Estimated resurrection time, 1 day later in the other world, i.e. 24 hours in Tokyo time. Please enter the door of rebirth. The Chosen One buzz. With an inexplicable roar in his mind, Hie Hie came back to his senses. Look around. He seemed to have returned to this space full of light. He had watched him leave here. It was also here that he welcomed his first rebirth. At this time, the golden door was no longer there, but the door of rebirth behind him, which seemed to be filled with 7-color light, was still standing in the air. Hie Hie can feel. Something in my body has changed. Hie Hie couldn't help but look at his palms, and it seemed that something was surging in his blood. This is Dragonborn. This is the word spirit. An incredible feeling kept rushing through Hie Hie's blood. Hie Hie felt this more clearly. This is the Dragonborn. This is the spirit of words. Although it comes at the cost of 1 death and 1 day in the afterlife. But the result is good. After all, he not only obtained the word spirit royal power with serial number 91 in the Dragon Clan sequence list. Moreover, he also grasped the clues to the prerequisite for activating his own word spirit supernuclear copy. 1. That is, the replica object must possess a word spirit. 2. The replicator object has complete trust in itself. There may be other unknown factors. But this time, I am very fortunate to know both premises at the same time. But in the system broadcast just now, there was a piece of information that was obviously extremely abnormal. The body was totally destroyed and it was destroyed by fire. This situation obviously shouldn't happen. First, Yuan Zhizheng was not dead. The incident was a big deal. There were other ordinary people at the scene, and even if he was dead, they could not have burned him in 1 day. Second, when something like this happens, the police will definitely come to investigate. Even if the body is burned for 1 day, it is far from enough. After all, it does not include the possibility of a forensic autopsy or something like that. Third, in fact, this is the most likely point. If he died and Yuan Zhizheng was still alive, would he treat his benefactor's body like this, regardless of whether he could wake up within a day? Obviously not. Well, it can only explain one thing. A person who has power but is very tolerant, and may even be the mastermind behind all this. The plan failed and we can no longer attack you and Jishung. So, vent your anger on your own corpse? In this world, in this city. A person who can be so calculating and manipulate the dragon servants, and is so perverted. I guess he's the only one. Jung von Herzog. Chapter 15. Jung von Herzog. The originator of Night of Wind and Tide. At the same time, it led the 8 snake clans and the fierce ghosts to ruin. He brought Eri into the Snake 8 clan in the identity of Tachibana Masamune, and set her identity as the daughter of Tachibana Masamune, the head of the Tachibana family, and began to lay the groundwork. He switched between the two identities of Tachibana Masamune of the Snake 8 families and King General of the Fierce Demon clan for more than 20 years without revealing any flaws. He completely controlled and used these two identities to approach Genjiro and Genjiro, who were fostered in the mountains by Bondarev. He was responsible for causing the two brothers Gen Kaishung and Gen Chinu to become enemies and become hostile to each other, which eventually led to their death. Finally, at the bottom of the Hongjing Deep Pit, a new generation of White King was born. He can be said to be a true dark strategist. At the same time, he is truly the only and biggest villain in the entire story. And for Hie Hie, this person. If he comes to this world, he must be crushed to ashes. Imprisoning Eri. Let Eri suffer. Even at the end. Killed her. It was because of him that all these tragedies occurred. Hie Hie clenched his fists, making a clicking sound, and his teeth ached from the intense biting. His eyes were filled with murderous intent and extreme coldness. It actually made the space seem a little illusory and transparent. After a long time, Hie Hie slowly closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. When I opened my eyes again, I was able to return to normal. He knows it very well. If I were to rely solely on this anger, I would rush to the 8 clans of Sheki to kill Herzog. Let's not talk about whether he can defeat Herzog with dark gold and red pupils. Even the spectators from the Sheki 8 clans who had no idea what was going on couldn't get past it. The result was nothing more than exposing his cards in front of this dark strategist in advance. An ability that is almost immortal, a power that can copy the words of others. Either one of them would be enough to drive the former chief scientist of the German genetic project crazy. Although for Hie Hie, he can be reborn after death. But it is too simple for a scientist to dismember a person's body and study it thoroughly without killing him. When a person cannot die, perhaps that is when the greatest pain comes. Then expose Herzog's true face and purpose in front of them? In fact, it was a respected elder and a young man of unknown origin. Who should we believe between the two? It goes without saying. Furthermore, Hie Hie just obtained the word spirit royal power copied by the super core. Even the throbbing in the blood continues to show the power of this force. But the problem is I don't even know how to use it. To go into the forest of thorns in a mortal body is to seek death, isn't it? Then why not tell Yuan Zhisheng everything? Hie Hie still shook his head secretly. Now he doesn't know what Yuan Zhisheng's current situation is, considering Yuan Zhisheng's injuries at that time. Even if he was a dragon born with S-level bloodline, there was no way he could wake up within a day. Then it is clear what should be done now. Hie Hie turned around and walked towards the door of rebirth resolutely. At this moment, a firm idea was imprinted in Hie Hie's mind: return home. And submit an application to study abroad at Castle College. During those 2 days, I had very few conversations with Yuan Zhisheng. But now thinking about it, we can extract some of the things he said. The strong and reliable brother he wanted to be must be referring to Eri. It can be seen that Eri is still under the protection of Gen Chizé. Also, he still has time to practice King of Fighters at night. This means that the current situation of the Sheki 8 families is still stable, so she is still safe. That's enough. Now there is only one thing Hie Hie needs to do: become stronger. Now the first step has been completed, and I have obtained the real power word spirit royal power. The next step is how to fully control this power. Go to Castle Academy. It will be the fastest and most accurate shortcut. Walking into the door of rebirth, Hie Hie began to replay in front of his eyes all the events from his last death to this death. The scene repeated itself until the half-dragon guard was about to hit his head against the wall for the second time. At that moment, Hie Hie suddenly exerted force with his right hand and tightly grasped a piece of scale armor on the half-dragon guard's neck with his left hand. He kicked his feet hard. His whole body suddenly turned a semicircle in the air. The center of gravity of the whole body is concentrated on the palm of the right hand, which is placed on the hilt of the sword of Tong Zikir. The hilt of the sword was pressed down by Hie Hie's entire body weight and the force applied by his right hand. It actually created an arc inside the half-dragon guard's body. Just at the moment of hitting the wall, Hie Hie was suspended in the air in such a wonderful posture. Deadpool was unable to restrain his strength at this point, and he crashed into the wall with such force. Without Hie Hie's buffer on his back, the handle of the boy's knife was directly stabbed again under the influence of the wall. And it also changed the arc. Deadpool lost all life at that moment. But he still stood there mechanically. And Hie Hie, with his left hand still tightly grasping the scales on Deadpool's neck, stood on the back of the half-dragon guard with his legs again. The right hand that was resting on the hilt of the knife was turned into a layer of flesh at that moment. Flesh and bones mixed together. The inertia caused by Deadpool's collision also caused Hie Hie's whole body to hit the wall. When his head hit the wall, Hie Hie felt a chill on his head. Then several lines of blood flowed down one after another, flowing through Hie Hie's determined eyes and his teeth that were still laughing wildly. "Doesn't it hurt? It hurts so much, I feel like I'm going to faint at any moment. Even now when I recall it, it still hurts like hell. But I don't know why." Hie Hie always thinks, "Isn't this good? It's better than the world before. No family, no dreams, no hope, no future. Numbness, chaos. Live for the sake of living." And now, finally, he had a desire to live. All that was lacking in the past can now be obtained by him alone. All the regrets in that story can be destroyed by him alone. Finally, the scene that reappeared before my eyes was the moment when Hie Hie fell down. The end of the door is the other world. The road to rebirth is infinitely open to you, the eternal chosen one. Haha. There was another inexplicable lack of oxygen, as if he had really just come back to life from the dead. It seems to be correct. Hie Hie stood up and looked around. It is a small space of about 4 square meters. A computer, a chair, and half a single bed. Nothing has changed since the last time I went out. It seemed that he was indeed teleported to the single room where he lived. Vein number 8, chamber 22. After catching his breath, Hie Hie stood up, slung over the shoulder bag on the table, took out the Nokia that was still charging and its charger and stuffed them into the left and right pockets of his clothes. I tidied up the single room again. Just like the first time I saw it. But it's a little strange. In this world, I should have been dead for a day. Anyone who came to check should have found this long ago. But nothing has changed here. Then the reason can only be pointed to my previous guess. The affairs of the half-dragon guard are all controlled by Herzog. All the information about his existence in this city, and all the evidence that could prove that Hie Hie knew Yuan Jisheng, might have been completely dealt with the methods of that dark strategist. It is not impossible to make him a fantasy character. Hie Hie thought about it and opened the shoulder bag. Open it by pulling the tab. There are small words on the pull tab that say Shanghai Forever 28 large bar. It turned out that Hie Hie had removed the chain from the model of the old retro bicycle that was exactly the same as the one his parents left him, and put it into the puller. Hie Hie always feels warm and powerful when pulling. It was as if there were 3 people holding his hands. Squeak. As the sliding door closed, Hie Hie walked out of the single room. A 100 yen coin was placed on top of a piece of lined paper on the bedside table. There is a question clearly written in Hyuxia: how many rounds of King of Fighters can you play with 100 yen? Chapter 16. Hie Hie closed the sliding door and went to the cashier to return the key with the gold lacquer tag. He was not afraid that anyone would find out that he had come back from the dead. Rather, he hoped that someone would discover him here. This at least shows that Herzog's cleaning is not perfect. He walked to the cashier counter and gently placed the gold lacquered sign on the counter. There were still 2 girls and a little boy inside. A girl with short black hair, about the same age as Hie Hie, leaned quietly against the wall connected to the cash register, looking in one direction casually, with no emotion in her eyes. From time to time, a bubble of chewing gum would blow out of his mouth and then be bitten. Every time he bites, a white, pointed canine tooth is revealed. Keep your hands in your pockets at all times. I always wear a pair of light pink Bose noise-cancelling earphones in my ears. Hie Hie seemed to be like this every time he saw her in Shuyi Internet Cafe these days. As for the little boy, he was now lying on a small sofa that seemed to be just the right size for him. One foot was placed on the handle, and the other foot was casually resting on the ground, still holding the PSP in his hand. The hand movements on the PSP buttons were intense. But there was only one expression on his face, as if, disdain? This caused Hie Hie to look at him a few more times. The small bench that was there before has disappeared. Of the three, he seemed to be the only one with whom he could communicate. It was the kind lady who was sitting upright in the reception seat and always had a beautiful smile on her face. Among these three people, she can't be the only one who is here for serious work? So Hie Hie tried to use his broken spoken English to ask the kind lady what they had seen and heard that day. The reason was that he went shopping in the city that day. Fortunately, the kind lady actually knew English. And I understood what Hie Hie said. The kind lady first sighed softly, then stood up and touched Hie Hie's hair. This caused Hie Hie to retreat tactically. The kind lady smiled even more charmingly at his reaction. It's a good thing you weren't there that day. After the sudden loud noise above, we and the people below wanted to run. But all passages leading to the first floor were guarded by teams of 2 fully armed special police officers. They said there were terrorists upstairs, and for our safety they temporarily blocked the way upstairs. Those who tried to force their way up the stairs were all knocked unconscious by the butt of a gun. I've never seen a police officer act so decisively. When we were finally allowed upstairs, it was like the upper floors had been forcibly demolished. The kind lady tilted her head slightly, placed her right hand on her cheek, frowned a little, and her tone was full of worry and fear. More than a dozen single rooms looked like they were crushed by a steamroller. And the most outrageous thing is that the wall near the residential area at the back has completely collapsed. Are all the terrorists nowadays giants? There was such a big commotion, and we clearly heard a few gunshots, but there was no bullet casing, not even blood. But fortunately they gave us enough compensation in the end, otherwise our boss would have cried his eyes out. When the kind lady said this, she seemed to have thought of someone and felt a little disappointed with him. And Mr. Yamada, the boss obviously hired him as a security guard because he had turned over a new leaf. I don't know where he went after that day. Hie Hie pretended to listen and just smiled, said goodbye to her and turned away. But as the real person involved, even the dead, it sounded to him. As expected, all of this was probably arranged by Herzog long ago. Guard the passage to avoid more witnesses. Regardless of whether the so-called special police are true or false, they are definitely Herzog's minions. The bloodstains on it, the body of the half-dragon guard, and the body of Hie Hie. All have been dealt with. It was as if the fatal fight on the first floor that day had never happened. Just like the disappearance of Mr. Yamada, the security guard who witnessed everything and fired 3 shots. The kind lady watched Hie Hie walk out of her sight. The space at the cash register seemed to be suddenly enveloped by a strong pressure. Except that the girl and the little boy remained the same. Everything else began to twist and break inexplicably. When the little boy saw this, he immediately raised his head and sat up straight, with his palms gently resting on his knees. There is nothing more sad than a dead heart. Lee, did I ever tell you not to change anything in the cash register casually? The kind lady finished slowly. The tone and intonation are still so gentle and pleasant. But for no apparent reason, beads of cold sweat appeared on the little boy's forehead. It was as if what she had just said was an invitation to death. The disdainful expression just now had long since disappeared. What replaced it was a kind of fear, engraved in the bones. It seemed that the little boy named Lee held his knees tightly with both hands. I want to control the difficult trembling of my body. I opened my mouth again and again but no words came out. After struggling for a long time, he finally finished speaking in a halting manner. That gentleman's things, I have kept them, well, in the treasury. His things, I don't dare to use them. Just saying these 2 sentences seemed to have used up all his energy. He was so exhausted that he couldn't even lift his head. The kind lady continued to stare in the direction where Hie Hie left for a long time. Sigh softly. Squeak. It's like the sound of a turbulent flow of electrons. With this sound, the pressure surrounding the cash register dissipated instantly. Everything that seemed twisted and broken before was instantly restored to its original state. Lee was lying on the ground at this time, as if he had been deprived of oxygen for a long time, and began to breathe violently. When he felt a little better, he slowly stretched out his right hand. Suddenly, a red dot appeared in the palm of his hand. Then countless light red rays shot out from the red dot and hit the ground, beginning to shake violently. Then a red ball appeared on the ground. It seems that something is being constructed inside the sphere. Wait until the red ball disappears and what is revealed. It turned out to be the small wooden stool that Hie Hie was sitting on when he first saw him. The kind lady never looked at him once the whole time. Looking at the corner where Hie Hie disappeared, his eyes seemed full of obsession and respect. The girl also raised her head and looked towards the corner. There was still no emotion visible in his eyes. It's like ripples in a calm ocean. And Hie Hie, at this moment, is walking slowly on the streets of Tokyo. The place he was going to now was the Shuntendo-affiliated hospital. Does this count as surrendering? It would be better for me to go back by myself than to let the people of the Fuma family, or others who are interested in the bounty, capture me. At least Li Ruin won't spend the extra $100,000. He still remembered all the routes he had taken after leaving Shuntendo Hospital. Therefore, he knew clearly which way to go. But at this moment, he walked very slowly. He really didn't know what expression he should have when he saw Li Ruin. What expression should I have when I see my parents and sister? If it was him, what expression would he have? On the sidewalk opposite, a girl was walking in front with her hands behind her back, skipping and jumping, with a bright smile on her face, and she seemed to be saying something. The boy walked slowly behind, carrying large and small bags in his hands, his face full of helplessness and pampering. The darkness of the night and the heat of summer are still no match for people's joy for their beloved ones. The wind from Hokkaido cannot blow into this city, and the sound of car horns stirs up ripples in the hot air. Hie Hie felt inexplicably depressed. It's like silk flying from the sky, gently caressing the gaps between fingertips and then quietly slipping away, like the vast ocean in midsummer, sweeping into a dream that no one knows about. It was such a pity that I didn't see her after getting so close to her. Hie Hie looked up at the sky. Even in the dark night, he could still see the clarity of the summer sky. I don't know when I'll come next time. Chapter 17. Hie Hie finally arrived at the gate of Shuntendo Hospital. Standing in front of the huge stone with Shuntendo Hospital engraved on it. After walking up a small slope, you will enter the hospital. He didn't know how long he had been standing there. All the contradictions and hesitations in my heart reached a peak at this moment. The sky, which was clear just a moment ago, suddenly started to drizzle. Drops fell, raising the smell of dust. Hie Hie finally walked to the cherry tree beside the slope, which had almost only branches left. At least there is a place to hide from the rain. As I slowly approached, I found it under a thicker branch. There seemed to be a light pink wooden sign hanging. It was shaking a little under the beating of the rain. Hie Hie couldn't help but stretch out his left hand to steady it. There are 2 lines of beautiful Huxia characters in Xanthium Sibericum on it, which read, "I only see the flowers falling, but I haven't seen the blooming period." Hie Hie actually smiled when he saw this. I just happened to arrive there when the flowers were falling. Thinking of this, I simply squatted on the tiled fence. Maybe a little rain can help me wake up a little. Hie Hie held the shoulder bag in his arms with both hands. After all, this small shoulder bag heirloomed from my ancestors doesn't seem to be waterproof. It is the middle of summer, but the rain feels inexplicably chilly. It's just right for lying on the bed and having a big dream. It was late at night, 12:34. But in this busy city, people continued to walk down the slope one after another. Some people had bright smiles on their faces. Without an umbrella, I held the briefcase over my head. It can be regarded as creating a small harbor for myself. This sudden rain was a relief for them. It seems more like an unexpected surprise. But some people, or rather most people, they all held umbrellas of different colors. The other hand was holding an umbrella with the Shuntendo Hospital logo printed on it and hanging down by the side of his leg. Still dripping slowly. But fortunately, I didn't get wet at all. Could it be that this is why their gazes are so dull? Hie Hie watched quietly. Watch them slowly blend into the drizzle. Blend into the hazy neon lights of the street. They look. It's so lonely. It's time to go in, we have to face it. Hie Hie stood up quickly and put his shoulder bag back on. Looking towards the slope, his eyes finally became firm. We have to face it. The rain is still falling, not heavy, but not light either. The sound of raindrops is neither harsh nor light. Hie Hie. A voice suddenly sounded from behind Hie Hie. It seemed to be trembling, full of disbelief. This voice is too familiar. Before the first death, the cry of that person in front of the hospital bed still rings in my ears. Hie Hie turned around slowly. The figure was covered in water stains and his hair was permed so hard that it looked unrecognizable. His eyes were bloodshot and his eye bags were dark and even blue. I don't know if the rain is getting heavy. Hie Hie couldn't tell whether the person was crying or laughing. Plum. The name that I had only known for a few days suddenly came out of my mouth. But Hie Hie held back after all. He escaped with the name of faking death and amnesia. So he turned around and continued walking forward. To be honest, he actually didn't know what to do or what to say. Hie Hie. Don't look back, keep moving forward. Hie Hie told himself that he had to do it. Then a burst of extremely fast tapping sounds quickly sounded behind him. Then Hie Hie felt like he was hit. Then his center of gravity shifted and he fell to the ground. Just in time, I finished that slope. The man turned Hie Hie over and grabbed Hie Hie's collar with both hands. The rain still fell on them and on the corners of Hie Hie's mouth. Seems a bit salty. Hie Hie, Hie Hie. I'm Li Ruyan. You know you won't die. Why are you pretending to have amnesia? Li Ruyan's face seemed a little distorted at this moment, half smiling and half complaining. But it is still a joy. But for Hie Hie, both now and before, Li Ruyan is to him what Karamazov, Dostoevsky's brother, is to him. Extremely complex. Because Hie Hie really didn't know what kind of person Li Ruyan was. At first, Hie Hie thought he was just an ordinary classmate, a rich second generation. But later Hie Hie heard what he said in front of his bed, and he must have a close relationship with himself, or with his brother. When Hie Hie was reborn for the first time and ran out of the hospital, he was able to call all the ninjas under the head of the Fuma family of the Snake 8 families to come find him. There was even a reward of $100,000. Such background. But in that story, it seems that such a person has never appeared in Chelan Middle School. To be honest, Hie Hie couldn't trust this person at all. But he said, that guy Li Ruyan, even though he looks silly on the surface, he's actually very fragile and sensitive inside. Do I have to do something? Hie Hie began to look Li Ruyan up and down. Then he seemed to think for a moment. He said tentatively, Li Ruyan. Li Ruyan's eyes then lit up and he smiled brilliantly. Yes. It's me. You really didn't lose your memory, right? No, right. As Li Ruyan spoke, he grabbed Hie Hie's collar with even more force. Seems extremely excited. At this moment, a sigh seemed to be heard from the shadow of the cherry tree. Then a man came out. The leather shoes made a rhythmic tapping sound on the ground. Slowly walked behind Li Ruyan, put his hand on his right shoulder, and said softly, Master Li, didn't you say that, amnesia caused by fake death? This is the best explanation now, and it is also the fact. Who knew that Li Ruyan swung his right hand back fiercely and slapped the man's hand away. He tilted his head slightly and glanced at the person behind him, his eyes full of cruelty and murderous intent. I am very disappointed in you, Yan Hong, and the so-called Feng Mo family that you are proud of. In 3 days, we can't even find a patient with amnesia. What a bullshit ninja sect. Before I lose my temper. Roll. After saying that, he turned around. Pa. Then this sound was heard. Li Ruyan's head suddenly felt dizzy and everything in front of him gradually turned black. He struggled to turn around, only to see Feng Mo Yanhong still making the knife hand gesture. Have a good sleep first, Master Li. Hie Hie looked at this scene in surprise, because the person in front of him was called Yanhong by Li Ruyan. And he is a man of Feng Ma Yanhong from the Feng Ma family. Shouldn't it be their class teacher, Zhang Yan? Call Li Ruyan, Master Li? And he just knocked Li Ruyan unconscious. Things seem to be getting more and more complicated. Who exactly is Li Ruyan? At this time, a noisy crowd holding umbrellas had gathered not far away. When Feng Mo Yanhong saw this, he slowly took out a badge with a spider pattern on it from the collar of his suit and put it on his chest. The people around took a closer look and instantly became quiet. It seemed as if they had never seen this before. They dispersed instantly and went about their own business. Continue talking when you should talk, and continue laughing when you should laugh. But the content certainly won't be about this anyway. After Feng Mo Yanhong finished this operation, he then caught a few drops of rain with his right hand. Wiped the badge hanging on his chest. That's why I hate this kind of trouble the most, but fortunately the family emblem is useful. After wiping, he picked up Li Ruyan with one hand and carried him on his back. Then he extended his right hand in front of Hie Hie who was still lying on the ground. Hie Hie saw this and did nothing. Because now that he has lost his memory, he shouldn't know this person. Seeing this, Feng Mo Yanhong's face, which was always sleepy, actually revealed a very forced smile. I'm your teacher. Your clothes are wet. You need to change them. To be honest, this smile is really unconvincing. But Hie Hie felt that this seemed to be a good step for him. He nodded slightly and followed Feng Mo Yanhong towards the main building of Shuntendo Hospital. Just the moment you step into the main building. Feng Mo Yanhong sighed inexplicably, but the tone seemed to float away like a gust of wind. Chapter 18. The roaring thunder in the clouds seemed to explode right next to my ears, making it even more shocking. The rain seemed to have been falling in the Tokyo sky for longer than expected. Hie Hie looked out through the plane window. The whole picture of the city beneath my feet is slowly becoming smaller and smaller. From time to time, a few golden red lightning ripples flashed across the sky. This private jet has only 2 seats, which are arranged facing each other. Feng Mo Yanhong, who was sitting opposite Hie Hie, was also looking out the window quietly, with his legs crossed, one hand resting on the windowsill with his chin supported, and he yawned loudly. Li Ruyan was sleeping soundly on the bed in the next cabin. Last night, or was it tonight? After the 3 of them entered the main building of Shuntendo Hospital, Tan Zhong immediately surrounded Hie Hie with a group of famous doctors in various fields. In the next 2 or 3 hours, Hie Hie went to various departments to conduct various examinations. First, we use the cardiac electrophysiological recording system, invasive blood pressure monitoring system, cardiac radiofrequency ablation device, electrocardiogram analysis system, multi-parameter monitor. Then there were some old men with white hair and white beards who looked, touched, knocked, and listened. It was almost 4 in the morning. Those experts and famous doctors summarized the results with a look of surprise on their faces. Tan Zhong informed Hie Hie and Feng Mo Yanhong. Mr. Hie Hie, you couldn't be healthier. Even his congenital heart disease that he inherited from his previous generation has completely disappeared. The reason why I was able to fake my death for a day is unknown. The cause of amnesia. Unknown. When it comes to this last sentence. This authority in cardiology is the winner of all the world's major medical achievements, in addition to the Nobel Prize in Medicine. The smile was so forced that it seemed even a little pathetic. He seemed to have aged a lot after this moment. A few strands of white hair were particularly noticeable among the originally thick black hair. After Feng Mo Yanhong got all the paper test reports, put it in a black leather document box. I took Hie Hie to sit for a while in a miniature Starbucks at the entrance of the hospital outpatient building. A gift shop was opened in the lobby. There is also a wind chime with a glass cherry blossom pendant hanging on the window. When the wind blows occasionally, you can hear the light sound of ding-ling-ling. The cup of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee in Feng Mo Yanhong's hand had just run out. The phone rang. Then they took off from a private airport. Feng Mo Yanhong said that this was something Li Ruyan had arranged long ago. After finding Hie Hie, he returned home immediately after having his physical examination. Of course, there were only 3 of them as passengers. Hie Hie, Feng Mo Yanhong, is Li Ruyan who has not yet woken up. Feng Mo Yanhong glanced at Hie Hie who was still looking out the window, as if to break the inexplicable silence. It should be dawn soon. Hie Hie still had no words. There wasn't even the slightest ripple in his eyes. Feng Mo Yanhong was so embarrassed that he touched his cheek with his fingers. Hie Hie actually didn't want to do that. But there is no way, he has lost his memory. Plus he was thinking. Think about the congenital heart disease in your body that can be fatal at any time. Why did it disappear directly after rebirth? Will the disease in the body be eliminated at the same time of rebirth? Or just eliminate all the negative effects on your body? Or even, directly creating a perfect body? There should be many possibilities. Different choices under different possibilities will lead to different results. Therefore, it must be confirmed to the greatest extent possible. What kind of possibility is that? It seems that with the infinite rebirth skill, one can actually reconstruct one's own body directly. Perhaps the third possibility is more likely. Wow! The sound of a sliding door opening immediately attracted the attention of Hie Hie and Feng Mo Yanhong. At this time, the plane happened to break through the clouds, and there was no more clouds or rain outside the window. Li Ruyan was seen rubbing the back of his neck slowly. The dark blue bags under his eyes did not improve despite this forced rest. But you can see that his complexion is much better. When Li Ruyan saw Hie Hie, he couldn't help but raise his hand to wipe his eyes. Then, with a smile on his face, he quickly sat down opposite Hie Hie. Feng Mo Yanhong had already stood up and stood behind Li Ruyan. The Li Ruyan at this moment was completely different from the Li Ruyan who was in front of the entrance of Shuntendo Hospital before. He just sat quietly opposite Hie Hie, smiling so brightly. It was a long while before he spoke. You know, when I woke up from my bed just now, I thought I was dreaming. Regardless of Hie Hie's confused expression, he continued, but fortunately, this is reality, the reality that you are still alive. Hie Hie just looked at Li Ruin like this quietly. There seemed to be a few tears still in the corners of his eyes. I couldn't help but think of what he said. Li Ruin, maybe he really is such a sensitive and fragile guy. Then, Feng Mo Yanhong took out the black cowhide file box. He took out the information and handed it to Li Ruin. The moment Li Ruin received it in his hand, he whispered, the previous move was very correct. Feng Mo Yanhong's expression didn't change at all, he just nodded slightly. Li Ruin looked through the inspection reports for each item one by one. All indicators are very normal, even strong. And even the congenital heart disease disappeared. Li Ruin was surprised and delighted. But in the end, joy prevailed. Doesn't the fact that Hie Hie is still alive mean that everything is reasonable? At this time, Li Ruin seemed to have thought of something again. He asked again tentatively, Hie Hie, do you still remember Teacher Zhang? Teacher Zhang Yan. The thumb of his right hand is pointed upside down at Feng Mo Yanhong. Hie Hie looked at it for a while, but couldn't seem to come up with an answer, so he just shook his head. Li Ruin then smiled and nodded slightly. But there was some disappointment in this smile. But what Hie Hie read from this question was a secret. Brother probably doesn't know all this about Li Ruin, or this background. And for Li Ruin himself, this is a secret. After that, none of the three spoke another word. They all looked out the porthole at the gradually brightening and widening sky and clouds. The plane flew slowly. Fly away from Japan and fly into the blue sky of the Pacific Ocean. Fly to the city where the protagonist is. Fly to, and his new home. Tokyo. Hie Hie left the next day, 4:35 p.m. Shoei Internet Cafe. A man with long black hair and wearing a black windbreaker walked slowly among the leaf veins on the basement floor of Shoei Internet Cafe. It's not that he has much free time. But with his current energy and strength, this is the best he can do. The paleness of his face and the confusion in his eyes all showed his weakness. That's right, this is Yuan Zhizheng who quickly awakened thanks to his powerful bloodline power. He must confirm one thing at this moment. The family said that his savior was missing. He saw with his own eyes that the savior who killed the half-dragon guard with the Tongzi cut had disappeared. I can't find it no matter how hard I try. They said that after investigation, they found that such a person had never appeared in Shoei Internet Cafe. The doctor in the family actually concluded that he was a character in his own imagination? Bullshit fantasy. He killed the half-bone scaled dragon guard with his physical body right in front of his own eyes. Is there anything more memorable than this scene? How could I believe their nonsense? I had planned to kick and beat these lazy guys after I recovered a little. Then go find it yourself. But when someone you absolutely trust will not lie to you, they tell you what they said. It's all truth. What a shock that would be. But how could it not exist? The man's right arm was crushed and bloody. The blood from his head flowed down to his chin and even dripped onto his face, which was still burning. And that rebellious and brilliant smile. It's like the fireworks blooming in the Arakawa sky on a midsummer night. How could it not exist? Chapter 19. Even if Yuan Zhizheng told himself, as the head of the Yuan family and the future patriarch, he should have trusted those family members he had known for a long time. Trust the man who treats him like his own son. But a figure that was not strong but inexplicably shone with a golden miraculous light seemed to be imprinted on the eye sockets and engraved in the mind. Therefore, he finally came to this place. It would not be difficult for a strong and gifted warrior to sneak out of the ward for a while. He walked up to the cashier. I found that the people at the cashier counter were 3 Shamit people with hair dyed in red, blue, and green colors respectively. The 3 of them looked at the sickly man standing in front of the cash register. A look of disdain. The one with the red rush of hair suddenly leaned close to Yuan Zhizheng, widened his eyes, and revealed an expression that he thought was very oppressive and cool. There was a 7-star cigarette with a black holder in his mouth. What are you looking at? If you want a private room, pay the money. If not, get out. You're wearing a black windbreaker in such hot weather. Do you think you're Johnny Stribble from the Wild One? There was no change in Yuan Zhizheng's expression. Or, do you simply disdain change? Yuan Zhizheng just slowly looked into the red-haired man's eyes. It is calm and peaceful, yet as deep as an ancient well. The red-haired man trembled backwards as if he was suddenly struck by lightning. Then he quickly pushed away the guest stool he had just sat on and took a few steps back. He leaned back and then quickly bowed forward, with the arc of the bow almost reaching the standard 90 degrees. The tone was trembling and full of respect. Sorry. The whole body is a little unstable. Because my legs were shaking too much. Please help me check if anyone has lived in room 22 of Leaf Vein 8 in the past 4 days. Yuan Jisheng was not at all interested in this man's change of attitude. He didn't want to waste time on this. Upon hearing this, the red-haired man quickly raised his head with a relieved smile on his face. He quickly wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with his hand. Then he pushed away green hair and blue hair, who were still in a daze in front of the computer. Use the mouse to click to query the information that the killer in front of you wants to know. Yuan Jisheng stood quietly in front of the cashier counter. Sweat kept breaking out on his forehead. The right palm that was supporting the platform couldn't help but curl into a fist. The 2 sternums in my chest that had not yet healed were still in severe pain. Not to mention running, he couldn't even speak loudly. Plus now. To be honest, he was very nervous. The 2 extremes of the query results. It almost represents his certainty of whether he is really sick. This is the source of his strength that got him here. It is also the pursuit of the last stubbornness of that figure. At this moment, his mind was as chaotic as a mess. The education and training he received since childhood taught him that he must trust his family, love his family, and protect his family. It must be unconditional and without reservation. But at this moment, a certain will in his heart was constantly telling himself. That polite and funny boy. That rebellious and heroic killer. They all really existed. It's in the memory. Sir, the computer shows that the 22nd vein of leaf number 8 has been in the past 4 days. No guests have stayed here. Perhaps no one could notice the slight tremor in Yuan Zisheng's body. Because it is too secretive and heavy. There are no words. I can't say anything anymore. Yuan Jisheng just turned around silently, put his hands in the pockets of his long windbreaker, and walked slowly out. Just as it came. The rain outside has not stopped and is even heavier now. The strong wind blew the rain down on the street. The long black windbreaker was rustling in the wind. The nylon umbrella I used when I came here is still leaning against the door of Shuiyi Internet Cafe. But Yuan Jisheng had already gone far away. No expression could be seen in the dim light. The rain is flowing under the corners of my eyes. I'm really sick. A man in an orange vest ran past Yuan Jisheng with a flyer covering his head. Almost hit it. I couldn't help but mutter under my breath, assholes are blocking the way. Then he continued running forward with a greedy smile on his face. You can earn some money cleaning the internet cafe, and sometimes you can even pick up some lost items. Even money. 100 yen is still money. As he spoke, a crumpled piece of lined paper slowly rolled out from the pocket of the orange vest. A coin fell to the ground. Rolled past Yuan Zisheng's feet. Rolling into the storm. Hie Hie, here we are. Li Ruyan's voice seemed to come to my ears. Hie Hie finally woke up. I don't know when I fell asleep leaning on my seat last night. Looking out the porthole. It's a bit foggy. It seemed to be early morning. An asphalt runway stretches into the invisible distance. It seems that they have returned to their motherland. As I walked down the plane's gangway, a familiar smell hit me in the face. It's like the smell of boiling fried dough sticks when you go out in the morning. It's also like the slightly tipsy smell you smell when you pass by a liquor store with friends on your way home from school. I can't really describe what the feeling is, I just feel. I miss you a lot, very naturally. This is more like what Hie Hie's body feels spontaneously. After all, where did Hie Hie get his friends from? Where do I get the money for breakfast? It takes all my effort to earn living expenses and book fees. But Hie Hie likes this feeling very much. Very comfortable and fresh. Not long after getting off the plane, an Audi Pikes Peak drove up to Hie Hie and others. After letting Hie Hie and himself sit in the back seat, Li Ruyan began to talk to himself. This car is made of a kind of memory metal. If there is a collision or friction, it can be restored to its original state by just pouring 90-degree hot water on it. And there is only one such car in the world. It should have been quietly displayed in the museum at the headquarters in Austria, Germany. Well, that's actually the truth. But I spent some money to have someone build me an identical one. How cool is that? Hie Hie just nodded woodenly, then smiled awkwardly and said, "Great. But Li Ruan seemed to suddenly realize something. Haha, if you didn't lose your memory, I really wouldn't tell you this. Look at this. But it's okay, after all. As he spoke, he became more and more sad for some reason. He just stopped talking and there was no further news. Although he appeared to be like this, he had actually already given up in his heart. Oh, so this is a truly rich person. He had actually seen this car in a poster in the original world library. The prices seem to be 270 million. And there is only one in the world. Oh, now there are two in the world. But it can also be seen from this incident. This world has many similarities or even the same features as the original world. Except, this world has dragons. It seemed like it took us a while to finally leave the airport. We drove on the road for a long time but didn't see any other vehicles. It took about half an hour to drive. A row of extremely high barriers suddenly appeared in front of the car. When they reached the bottom of the barrier, a crack suddenly appeared on it. Then the split retreated to the sides. Just like that, a new road suddenly appeared ahead. And an ordinary taxi was also pushed out from the wall on the right. Hie followed Li Ruan to change the means of transportation and got into an ordinary taxi. And the driver was naturally Feng Mo Yanhong. When the taxi drove out, the wall automatically moved towards the middle. However, Hie and others seemed to have driven into a tunnel. Hie only discovered it the moment he drove out of the tunnel. After the wall was closed, it looked like a real mountain when viewed from this side. And they came across from the other side of the mountain. Hie couldn't help but knocked his head. Well, today I've seen something really high-end and luxurious. It's almost enough. I'll move into Bungbu soon. I don't know how long I sat there. There are more and more cars and billboards around. When passing the pier of a bridge, you can also see a bright billboard on the bridge. It says, "Welcome to Yuking." Hie understood, it was coming. That's where the story begins. The beginning of the awakening of the protagonist. Chapter 20. When dusk settles into the mountains and rivers. Hie and the other two finally arrived at their destination. Feng Mo Yanhong stopped the car in front of a bus stop. Then wait in the car. I took out an eye mask from the flip storage compartment, put it on, lowered the backrest, and fell asleep instantly. There is also a pair of 9 Magadama of reincarnation printed on the eye mask. As soon as Hie stepped out of the car, he smelled a strong aroma of aged wine. Following the smell, I saw a shop selling loose liquor. It's called, Forget Your Worries Wine. At the door, an old man with grey hair and beard was lying on a wooden rocking chair. In his right hand he holds a bamboo fan. His mouth was slightly open, and a few worn and yellowed teeth were still visible. Li Ruan also looked at the small shop silently. A smile full of nostalgia and happiness. That's Grandpa Ren. I think this store has been here since we were in elementary school. He always likes to take a nap there. You used to worry that someone might steal his wine. Later, 3 kilograms of Lao Baigan were actually stolen. Ha 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 ha. As Li Ruan spoke, he laughed happily and freely. Hie was also smiling. It was as if he had experienced and heard these things before. In fact, he really felt that. It's all very familiar and natural. Let's go, don't let him know we're back. Li Ruan suddenly turned around with a fake look of fear. My plan to persuade you to buy alcohol was discovered before, and since then he has been acting weird when he sees me. It's really unbearable. An old man can be so sharp and sarcastic. As he spoke, he clasped his hands together, trembled, and took a breath of cold air, as if he recalled something extremely terrifying. Hie watched him show off, and the curve of his mouth couldn't help but widen. His smile seemed to have lasted for a long time. As Li Ruan walked, he slowly introduced to Hie some people and scenes that he should be familiar with. Along the way, many people would say hello to Hie when they saw him. He even came over and asked him how he felt about his trip to Tokyo, Japan. This can be answered. But forget it. So basically it was Hie who was laughing, and then Li Ruan who was talking. Not to mention, everyone around treated Hie as if they were looking at a sensible and cute golden retriever. Li Ruan is a husky, a mischievous husky who may assimilate the golden retriever at any time. Until I walked through a small alley. Walk past 2 more doors. A $2 boutique and a breakfast shop with its shutters drawn but a faint smell of cooking fumes. Li Ruan, who had been noisy all the way, gradually calmed down. Walking slowly in front, crossing my fingers in front of my chest and then releasing them. It seems like he is struggling with something that is difficult to express. He stopped and looked at a small iron door next to him. Sandwiched between the two left and right facades is a small iron door about 2.2 meters high and 0.8 meters wide. There is a passage about 10 meters long behind the iron gate. At the end of the passage is a staircase. Hie Hie, your home is on the bottom floor of this building. When you reach the end of this road, go down one more level and you will reach it. There are lots of tiger stickers on the door. That was put there by your sister when she was a child. You said it looked pretty so you never tore it off. Li Ruyan never looked into Hie Hie's eyes when he said these words. Hie Hie looked at Li Ruyan, who suddenly seemed a little abnormal, and felt somewhat confused. And I will definitely find a solution to your amnesia. As long as I find it, I will help you restore your memory immediately. After saying that, he resolutely turned around and walked back the way he came. Hie Hie was stunned, not understanding what was happening all of a sudden. Just wanted to speak. Then he saw Li Ruyan stopped and turned his back to Hie Hie. I wonder if it's because the cars on the road are honking too loudly. Li Ruyan's voice trembled a little. Hie Hie, I'm sorry. Then he continued walking forward. There was no echo behind. Li Ruyan smiled palely. Tell yourself in your heart that maybe this is a good thing. Until the sound of very fast running was heard behind. Then he was patted on the head. Li Ruyan touched his head and looked back. Hie Hie's smile was bright and healing. He stretched out his right fist and pressed it directly against Li Ruyan's chest. Although I have lost my memory, I can still feel it. You are a very good friend of mine. I won't blame you or anything, just be happy. My younger brother must think so too. After all, Li Ruyan has been deliberately hiding his sadness all the way. It looks really fragile. When Li Ruyan heard this, the area around his eyes instantly turned red. With his head lowered, his expression unseen, he nodded involuntarily, once, twice. I will. Hie Hie stood in front of the iron gate. Li Ruyan still left. He said that he had something to do before seeing Hie Hie next time. Hie Hie really didn't know how to persuade him. I really couldn't blame Li Ruyan for my first death, but my brother did have a heart attack on the plane. In a sense, it is also related to him. Hie Hie's mind is in a mess. The biggest problem now is not so much Li Ruyan, but what is in front of him. There lived my mother, father, and sister. But I really know nothing about this. Hie Hie sighed softly and pulled the iron door. Squeak. Perhaps it's because the bottom of the iron door is too close to the ground. The sound was particularly loud in the empty passage ahead. Hie Hie slowly walked into the passage. It was so quiet in there that I could almost hear my own heartbeat. Well, jumped hard and fast. If I had another heart disease, I would probably die again. There's no way, he's really nervous now. When was the last time you spent time with your parents? The memory is a little worn out. What a feeling that is. Why is a passage that is only 10 meters long so long? Finally I reached the end of the passage and still needed to go downstairs. The stairs leading down are on the side covered by the passage. Hie Hie couldn't help swallowing because of nervousness. Next, down one level. The stairs going down were a little dark, and the light from the light bulb above the landing, whose wick had already turned black, was barely enough to cover the light. But isn't it nice to still be able to see the stairs? After walking up 2 flights of stairs, I finally reached the next floor. In fact, it is also the bottom layer. There is a clean white shoe rack next to the stairs going down. On the top there are 4 pairs of cotton slippers for winter. Red, blue, black, pink. Each pair of shoes has a small strip of cloth of a different color sewn on it. Moms, dads, brothers, sisters. An inexplicable feeling of warmth and familiarity arises spontaneously. A smile appeared on Hie Hie's face at some point. Now. Hie Hie looked at the door with many tiger stickers on it. There was no stagnation or hesitation. Knock gently on the door. Knock, knock at this time. The 8 families of Snake in Tokyo. In the arcade, a character with white hair and white pants was knocked down by a boy with a middle part and a forehead protector in the 3rd round. Announce the winner. Yuan Jisheng held the handle in his hand, looking at the character on the screen intently. It took me a long time to come back to my senses. Looking at the girl with red hair and red eyes next to him, his sister. Eri Yusuji with a faint smile. I almost won. Eri held a small cherry red notebook in both hands, her face full of pride. Yuan Jisheng didn't say anything, still smiling. The sight gradually moved upwards, looking towards the sky in the courtyard outside the side walkway. He has been in a daze like this for no apparent reason lately. When he came to his senses, he found that Eri was looking at him. Then she wrote in her little notebook. Are you tired lately? Yuan Zhizheng couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw this. Is it really that obvious that I am disappointed? Then he seemed to suddenly think of something and made himself laugh. Would you like to hear a story from me? Oh, to be precise, it's a fantasy story. Eri nodded slightly, somewhat expectantly. Yuan Zhizheng then told the story of the boy and himself, including the disappearance of the boy. After hearing this, Eri's eyes turned red. She picked up the notebook and quickly finished writing, then showed it to Yuan Zhizheng. That person can't be found anymore. Zhen Chizhe did not answer, but asked Eri instead. What kind of person do you think he will be? Without any hesitation, Eri wrote down in the notebook, he must be a very gentle and powerful person. Zhen Chizhe gave Eri a thumbs up. I think so too. Chapter 21. Hie, go open the door. Mom is watering the flowers. From the moment this sound was heard, Hie Hie's heart began to tremble violently. My right foot couldn't help but step back. His lips opened and closed, as if he was about to say something that he had been waiting for too long. My eyes were wet without knowing when, not because of sadness, not because of pain. It is an outburst of emotion from the depths of the soul that has been lost and recovered. He wanted to escape for some unknown reason, and the various emotions surging in his heart almost made it difficult for him to breathe. But he still stood in front of the door covered with tiger stickers. Because there seemed to be several bonds from the soul and blood that were pulling him and telling him, "You're home already. The thousands of lights behind me are not my home." Someone inside the door responded with a okay. Then, Hie could hear the sound of footsteps clearly and inexplicably. Is it because the sound insulation of this door is not very good? Elder brother. Before the door opened, a girl's surprised and excited voice was heard. Before Hie could come to his senses, the door was quickly pushed open. Immediately afterwards, a white figure threw himself into his arms. Brother! Why did you come back early? The rhyme is full of joy inside and out. Hie was confused and just stood there in a daze. He looked down at the figure that threw itself into his arms. But I saw that this person was wearing a light pink hairpin in his hair, and there was a little tiger pattern engraved on the wider side of the hairpin. Hie's heart trembled suddenly, and it seemed that many memories were about to emerge. My brain feels numb for no reason. He couldn't help but put his right hand on his head and closed his eyes. Hie, did you study well today? Such a sentence suddenly appeared in the air. Hie felt a little strange. Who said this inexplicably? It felt so close. So close, it seems to be right at my mouth. He slowly opened his eyes and realized that his mouth was slightly open. Then, as if from a divine messenger, he closed his mouth and repeated the same lip shape and sound. Hie was a little surprised because he found that this was what he said. It said very naturally, very calmly, very dotingly. As if he was supposed to say that, as if he was meant to say that. The person in his arms seemed to tremble slightly when he heard these words. Then he slowly loosened his arms that were holding Hie tightly. He took a few steps back, one hand behind his back and the other running through his hair. He seemed to be smiling with a guilty conscience. Hie. Well, as a younger sister, I realized that my brother would be back today, so I took a day off and Hie looked at the person in front of him. Her height might just reach my neck, and she was wearing a white dress with a ribbon at the collar tied into a light pink bow. His eyes were filled with the beauty of mountains and rivers, the sun, the moon, and the sunset, brilliant and bright. She was looking at herself, smiling so innocently and cutely. It actually reminded Hie of how he looked when they first met in that space. Seeing that her brother seemed to be distracted, Hie seized the opportunity and ran into the house. While running, he shouted to the right, "Mom and Dad! My brother is back early. Well, I'm going to go back to the house to study first." The sound of the word study is inexplicably much louder, as if trying to take credit for something. Then a male voice immediately said, "Only your brother can control you." Hie looked at this scene, and the corners of his mouth actually rose slightly. This feeling is so familiar, so natural. He thought he should like this feeling. It's time to go in. Hie couldn't help but straighten her clothes again and put her hands on the strap of her shoulder bag. Slowly walk into this home. Step by step, walk carefully and solemnly. It's like a person who has been away from home for half his life and finally returns to his doorstep after going through untold hardships. But I feel a little lost. After entering the door, there is the hall, and there is a small dirt area under the stairs on the right. It should be the extra space created when the walls were built to separate it from the surrounding high-rise buildings. This means that the floor below the iron gate outside is the first floor of the building. At this time, part of the land was planted with vegetables, and part of it was planted with flowers. Because Hie Hie could see at a glance that the path in the middle was split. There are sunflowers planted on the left and cabbages planted on the right. Year is back, why so early? Didn't Li Ruan say he would be gone for a month? At this moment, a voice sounded, and Hie Hie felt his shoulder loosen, and his shoulder bag was picked up by someone. So he unconsciously lowered his head and let him take off the shoulder strap. When Hie Hie looked up at the man, there was only a back view. He was wearing a military training jacket used at school, with mud all over the corners. He was wearing a yellow safety helmet, which was a little crooked at the moment. He was wearing a pair of rain boots, which were covered with lime and mud so that it was impossible to tell what color they were. Holding the shoulder bag that she had just taken from Hie Hie, she hung it on a floor-standing round hanger. There was space only at the highest point, so he had to raise his right hand high to hang on. Seeing this, Hie Hie seemed to suddenly know who the person in front of him was. An emotion that had been suppressed for too long suddenly burst out. Just standing there, looking at that figure from behind. Tears streaming down my face. Hie Hie was like a wounded child at this moment. He had clearly made up his mind to be a man, so he tried not to cry or make a fuss. But suddenly, my parents appeared before my eyes. The wound that was almost healed opened again, becoming even bigger and deeper. Blood is flowing. Grandpa said, if my parents are around, I can cry as much as I want. Hifukeo hung up his shoulder bag and turned around. But I saw Hie Hie still standing there, crying like a tearful person. He was suddenly panicked and didn't know what to do, so he quickly ran to Hie Hie. You, what's wrong with you? Have you been bullied in Japan? Tell Dad who it is. Even the Prime Minister wants him to give an explanation. As he spoke, his face turned red and he seemed really angry. But shouldn't I be angry? You have to know that except for the cry when he was born, Hie Hie never cried a second time with them. Their children are always so sensible and always smiling. But now she is crying so sadly, what kind of suffering must she have endured? To be honest, if Hie Hie was really bullied, he could really give that person a few shovels on the spot. Just use the steel shovel he often uses on the construction site. But Hie Hie didn't react at all after hearing this. She just suddenly hugged Hifukeo and cried as quietly as possible. He was completely panicked. Mother! Mother! A woman still wearing an apron responded and walked back from the muddy ground outside the hall. She had just been watering a new circle of roses around the sunflowers. What's the matter? Year is back, right? Before he could finish his words, he saw Hie Hie hugging Hifukeo, and crying. The mother's eyes instantly turned red and the shower head in her hand fell to the ground. He quickly ran to Hie Hie and touched his son's head. She wanted to speak, but found her voice was trembling, because she really couldn't imagine why a child like that would cry like that. Or rather, she almost didn't dare to think about it. She said nothing, just gently stroked her son's head. Hold back the tears welling up in your eyes. Smiling gently and watching. For a long, long time. He no longer had a clear memory of what his parents looked like. Because sometimes it is painful to remember too clearly. Tears blurred Hie Hie's vision. He wiped it several times before he could see clearly. I didn't know when my hands were already holding my parents' hands. Hold on tight. It seems like it will suddenly disappear if you relax a little. But he still remembers this feeling. Warm and absolutely safe. Hie Hie looked at the hands he was holding, and a childish and innocent smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It's like a child catching a parent playing hide-and-seek with him. Tears flowed down the corners of his mouth and dripped onto the ground. Dad, Mom, I really miss you. Chapter 22. I've survived all the hardships. I don't look forward to being with anyone anymore. This idea has long been ingrained in Hie Hie's mind. Because if someone who already has nothing asks for too much, he will only lose more. Even though he had nothing left to lose. However, the warmth transmitted from the clenched hands at this moment made him want to get closer, want to get it, want to sink into it. It even made him feel how lucky he was to have something that could break his heart. Just like the girl who longs for warmth on a winter night of Shrovetide in a fairy tale kingdom. Ignite the darkness and seize the fleeting light. Hold it in your arms and sink into an eternal dreamland more beautiful than heaven. Zhang Xinjian stroked Hie Hie's hair gently, slowly, and quietly. Seeing that he seemed to be a little better, he asked softly, "Year, what happened? Can you tell Mom?" She still had a gentle smile on her face, even though there were a few crystal tears hanging on the edges of her eyes. He really wanted to talk to them for days and nights. What I can say? What I want to say? Like a river hanging from the sky. Boundless, endless source. But he couldn't say that now. Although Hie's emotions exploded and he was almost on the verge of collapse at this moment, he was still very clear in his mind. I am a time traveler. Everything that happened before this moment, whether it was sad or happy, they will only be secrets in your heart. The system once said, it will take 10 years for me to be fully accepted by this world. No one knows what will happen if the identity of the time traveler is revealed. So, at least until this time, one's past will be completely sealed. Even if there is nothing to show. Hie slowly raised his head and looked at the parents in front of him. His father still held his right hand tightly, so tightly that he could almost feel the calluses between his fingers. The mother gently wiped away the remaining tears from the corners of his eyes, so gently that it seemed as if she could accommodate everything about him. Dad, Mom, and sister are the people I cherish the most. From now on, I will be the older brother, and the older brother will be me. Hie recalled everything he had said. And all the answers I gave. Although I have almost forgotten how to get along with my family. But I'll learn it again. Hie resolutely loosened his tightly clenched hands. Then he used his sleeve to wipe away the tears from his eyes and dry all the tear marks. Take a deep breath, then let it out slowly. I adjusted my mood and then gave a smile that I thought was very natural. The voice couldn't help but tremble slightly. It's okay, I just missed you too much. Dad, Mom. The tones of the last two addresses sounded inexplicably awkward. Hifukeo was obviously unconvinced by this and was even a little surprised. He was about to say something when Zhang Xinjian grabbed his hands by the corner of his clothes. I just saw him shake his head slightly, and then gave him a stopping look. Hie could naturally sense this. He also knew how ridiculous the reason he had just given was compared to his crying. But the fact is, that's just the case. Zhang Xinjian patted Hie's back hard. He glared, then said in feigned anger, I've only been away for a few days and I'm already homesick. I was so scared just now. Hie raised his right hand and touched the back of his head, then laughed out loud. However, with his slightly red and swollen eye bags, his smile seemed very forced, even bitter. This is because he just came to his senses and found something very difficult to do. My parents and sister seemed to be completely unaware of my amnesia. In other words, Li Ruan didn't tell them about Hie's death until one day after his death? Not to mention the amnesia that followed. At this moment, Hie suddenly understood why he said that Li Ruan was an idiot. Even if I didn't dare to say it before, I still have to tell him about the current situation just now. Oh. Could it be that the I'm sorry he said outside just now was because of this? It's better not to be such a bad friend. Hie suddenly felt a little regretful and said that she would not blame him. But we have to put this matter aside for now, there is a problem now. For everything about this family, for Hie. Isn't he in the state of amnesia? I had originally planned to use this excuse to get away with it, and then slowly collect information. Since this is the case, we can only make the best of it. After a quick brainstorm, we came up with a solution to this problem. No, a solution. That is the conclusion. Hie suddenly remembered that he still had 5,109 yen in his pocket. Previously, I exchanged 300 Huaxia coins for 5,409 yen at the bank. In the end, I only spent 300 yen. But he searched the pockets of his clothes and pants but found nothing, and he suddenly became panicked. I quickly walked to the floor standing round clothes rack and looked through the shoulder bag. Fortunately, it's inside. 5,109 yen, not a yen less. He was just worrying about whether he would take the money with him when he died the second time. After all, if he had brought it with him, it would have been burned together. It's such a waste. 5,109 yen can also be exchanged for 280 Huayi coins. It was almost enough to cover my expenses for a month. Hie first sorted out the 5,000 largest denominations, and then took out the coins one by one. 100 yen each, 5 yen each, 4 for 1 yen. Hold the banknotes in your left hand and the coins in your right hand. Then he walked towards Hifugui and handed the Japanese yen in his left and right hands to him. Dad, here is 5,109 yen. I only spent 20 yen of the money you and Mom gave me. The rest is equivalent to 280 yuan of our Hawaii currency. Whenever you have time, go and exchange it back. Otherwise, if the exchange rate changes, it will be affected. Hifukeo looked at the Japanese yen in his hand and couldn't help but smile. My son always seems to be like this. I clearly said that the money I gave him would eventually come back to me more or less. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but reach out and touch Hie Hie's head. To be precise, I should say it was rubbed. You little brat, you have to give me some of the money I give you, right? Dad said that what I give you is yours. As long as it's for you and Yezii, Dad will never be short of money, you know that. As Hie Hie listened, a feeling that seemed to have been forgotten for too long suddenly arose. The smile is bright and glorious. It's as if his father is really a person who will never be short of money, and he is the son of such a father. Hifukeo put the Japanese yen safely in his trouser pocket, and then took out a small stack of money from his right pocket, including several banknotes of various colors. He took out a relatively new 50 yuan note and handed it to Hie Hie, then patted Hie Hie on the shoulder. Okay, you should have just got off the plane, go and rest for a while. Dad has to go out to work. Take this money. You're going to college soon, so you still need to carry some money with you. Hie Hie looked at his father who was shorter than him, smiled calmly and childishly, and stretched out his hand to take the 50 yuan. There is still some warmth on the paper. As my father said. Whatever he gives me is mine. Chapter 23. Hie Hie returned to the room. It's easy to find because there's a bunch of blue knots hanging on the door handle. The door handles of the 3 rooms have the same shape, but in different colors. The room is only about 10 square meters at most. There were few things inside, just a bed and a simple wardrobe. I have 1 or 2 pieces of clothing for all seasons. A desk with neatly arranged books and an old-fashioned E27 screw-type desk lamp. That's all. Hie Hie always felt that he had lived here for a long time. Before I picked up that book, I hadn't read her story. I seem to live in a place very similar to this place. Perhaps, his heart has never been as brilliant and broad as the mountains and seas in his eyes. This room is located in the interior and has no windows, so the lights must always be on. The faint yellow light cannot reach everywhere. The darkness in the corner may be the hidden truth. Hie Hie suddenly remembered the thick diary in his bag. So I walked out of the room and prepared to get it. As soon as I opened the door, I found Hie Hie standing at the door with her head down. Her hair, which was neither too long nor too short, just covered her sad expression. He seemed to be holding a test paper in his hand, which he kept opening and closing. He was mumbling something. She didn't seem to notice the door opening. She was still fiddling with the test paper until Hie Hie walked up to her. The test paper opened and closed, corresponding to her muttering. Say, don't say, don't say. Hie Hie couldn't help but bend down slightly and take a closer look. Good guy, math, 59. It is truly a score that is out of reach for me. He also roughly knew why Yezii was standing here and couldn't help laughing. But he held back. Ahem, if you rub it again, the paper will be ruined. Hie Hie tried hard to create a serious expression. Is that what should be done in this situation? Unexpectedly, Hie Hie seemed to be frightened. She screamed ah, and suddenly raised her head, bumping directly into Hie Hie's chin. Impartial and solid. Hie Hie was knocked back several steps. It was like an uppercut, and it almost knocked him out. Hie Hie seemed to be in great pain as well. She squatted on the ground, touching the back of her head with one hand, and buried the test paper in her arms with the other hand, and began to sob softly. Seeing this, Hie Hie no longer cared whether he was in pain or not and hurried back to Hie Hie. I was at a loss, with my hands hanging in the air, not knowing what to do. Yet. Yezii, are you okay? Let go of your hand so I can see if you are hurt. If Hie Hie could be calmer at this moment, he would notice the helpless and all-seeing expression on Zhang Xinjian's face as she passed by in the hall with a bundle of cabbage. Brother, my head hurts so much, I don't know if it's bleeding. Hie Hie spoke word by word, and she seemed to be in unbearable pain, with obvious crying tones in her voice. Bleeding? How could this be possible? Hie Hie quickly picked up Hie Hie. Then he ran out of the door. Just now when Hie Fukao walked out of the door, it seemed that the door was not closed tightly and it opened with a bump. When he left the house, he shouted to his family, "Mom! Yezi's head seems to be injured. I'll take her to the clinic outside first. I'll come back and explain to you later." Zhang Xinjian didn't even look back and continued washing the cabbage in her hands, then took out a piece of pork from the refrigerator. "Okay. Remember to come back early for dinner." "Ah? Eating?" Hie Hie denied it directly, thinking that he must have heard it wrong. There was a row of 12 steps, and Hie Hie climbed up in 2 or 3 steps. In less than 8 seconds, he ran to the iron gate in front of the street carrying Hie Hie. What does it mean to move as fast as the wind? If he remembered correctly, there was a clinic about 100 meters to the left opposite the Forget Worry shop. Although it may not seem like a big deal, emergency measures are the most important now. Perhaps Hie Hie himself did not realize that at this moment his speed was almost equal to the Jamaican sprinter's world record of 9.58 seconds in 100 meters. And he was holding someone. "Wow brother, you run so fast. Why don't we just go to Shilan for a stroll?" Hie Hie was held in a princess hug, smiling with her hands raised high. The wind from her running brushed across her raised eyebrows, and her hair swayed slightly. "Oh, good." At this moment, all Hie Hie could see was the clinic slowly approaching and the pedestrians dodging around. As for what Hie Hie said, I heard it. But I just heard it. But after running a few steps, Hie Hie suddenly braked and stopped. If Hie Hie hadn't been held very tightly in his arms, she would have been thrown dozens of meters away by inertia. He seemed to have suddenly grasped something, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong, and his expression became uglier. Hie Hie saw the change in his expression very carefully, and only then did she realize that her brother seemed to really think that she was hurt. "You can see it quickly before." Hie Hie slowly put Hie Hie down, and when she stood firmly, he reached out and touched her head. Then he took her hand and walked towards the clinic. "No bleeding is good." But there was indeed a small bulge. This injury cannot be taken lightly. Hie Hie held Hie Hie's hand and stood in front of the zebra crossing. The indicator light ahead turned red a second before they arrived. 42 seconds. Hie Hie was silent, and even his expression did not change, which made Hie Hie even a little scared. He held her left hand so tightly that she felt numb. "In the future, don't joke like this with your brother. Brother still has a lot to learn. But I will trust everything you say to my parents without reservation. Don't let brother worry." Hie Hie seemed to be looking at the numbers on the indicator opposite. 121110. Every word he said seemed to be counting down, staying in Hie Hie's heart. But she didn't understand what her brother said in the last sentence. "Why do you look so lonely?" In a trance, she looked up at her brother in front of her. When did it become so blurry? The countdown returns to 0 and the indicator light turns green. Hie Hie took Hie Hie and slowly stepped onto the zebra crossing and walked across the street. The journey is not even halfway through. But 20 seconds was enough for the two siblings to slowly pass by. In the clinic, there is always a mixture of the smell of alcohol and disinfectant. Many people were receiving 4 drips and talking in the reception area inside. The person in pain can fall asleep while sitting with a mask on, while the accompanying person has to lie down across 4 positions and have a big dream. A pot-bellied doctor gently pressed on Hie Hie's head a few times. Then he turned and walked towards the pharmacy counter. With every step he took, he could even see the fat rippling through the already wrinkled white coat. I saw him bending down with difficulty, then pushing open the horizontal glass below and taking out 2 medicines. A box of anti-inflammatory capsules, taken orally, 3 times a day. A plaster, applied externally, once a day. 48 yuan. When Hie Hie heard the final offer, she couldn't sit still and immediately said to Hie Hie, "Brother, this little packet will heal in a few days. Don't buy it. It's too expensive." When the fat doctor saw this, his shiny face was full of contempt, and he actually took the 2 medicines back from the table. "What medicine can you get if you don't have money? It's a poverty disease. Humph, even all the Nobel Prize winners in medicine can't cure it." Hie Hie directly handed him 50 yuan, which was just right. "I still need to carry some money with me." Upon seeing this, the fat doctor handed the 2 boxes of medicine back, still with a look of disdain on his face. "The auscultation fee is $5. I'll give you $2. It's really unlucky." Hie Hie reached out to take it, but the fat doctor's hands touched hers. There was a certain greed in his eyes. With a scream, both drugs fell to the ground. Hie Hie has already hidden aside. The fat doctor's face hit the table with a bang. The glass was about to break with a cracking sound. Hie Hie grabbed the fat doctor's head with his right hand, increasing the strength. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Everything happens in just a moment. Either, leave your hands behind, or die. Chapter 24. The air froze. The only sound throughout the clinic was the crackling sound of glass about to break. And the fat man under Hie Hie's command, who was twisting like a maggot and screaming like a pig being slaughtered. The moment he caught the fat man, he also saw the expressions of everyone around him. Some were surprised, some were gloating, but most. It's fear. Just as wild beasts fear fire, just as sheep fear standing creatures that deprive them of their freedom. Perhaps in their hearts at this moment, Hie Hie is just like this. It looked like a creature that might eat them at any time. Monster, no matter whose eyes you look into, the result is that you will dodge. A chill and sadness that almost swept over my entire body burst out from my heart. Hie Hie understands the emotion this feeling represents all too well, lonely, but this time, what I felt seemed to be deeper, more. Can't breathe. They are like living beings seeking death outside a fence that reaches into the sky. And Hie Hie is the only one, the thickest, the one that everyone avoids, dark. Only then did he suddenly realize it. In one's body and blood, and even deep in one's soul. It seems like something has been lost. A very important thing. Hie Hie suddenly smiled, as if he already knew the answer. Dragon blood sorrow. To gain power, you have to lose something important. I knew it a long time ago. I just didn't expect that when it really arrived, I would be so embarrassed to receive it. But it's okay, if it's just that inexplicable loneliness. Sorry, it's been 6 years. Have you thought about it? What is your choice? The tone was calm and peaceful, and the rhymes were full of murderous intent. At this time, the fat man seemed to have no strength left to struggle. Hie Hie then slowly relaxed his strength. I don't do this for murder. Just to give him a choice. There was no blood on the slightly cracked glass. It seems that fat has become a wall of protection for him. The fat man's tears suddenly burst out, and his words were full of begging. I was wrong, with you, I was really wrong, please forgive me. This answer made Hie Hie a little confused. Did I ever give you this choice? As he spoke, he put more force on his hands. The fat man quickly changed the target of his crying. He understood that the man in front of him could really take his life. Little sister. No, miss. Please let him spare me, with you. My head hurts. Hie Hie had already been standing there in a daze. In all her memories. Not to mention fighting, she had never even seen her brother angry. Seeing that both sides seemed hopeless, the fat man just started crying loudly. Cursing Hie Hie, and cursing the indifferent onlookers around. It seems that you have made your choice. Haven't I already given him a choice? At this moment, the restless feeling in the blood had reached its peak. A feeling of clarity permeates the whole body, as if a cold wind is blowing through the meridians, blood, and bones. It's like taking a large bottle of stimulant at once. Hie Hie couldn't help but laugh. The blue veins on his hands suddenly popped out, and there was a kind of desire in his eyes. Desire, to kill the person in front of me. A pair of light golden red pupils were now staring at the prey. If someone stood closer to Hie Hie, they would notice it. A few ancient silver dragon scales appeared on his neck without him noticing. At this time, a hand finally grabbed Hie Hie's hand. It's ready, Hie Hie. This man's strength is much greater than Hie Hie at the moment. Brother. I'm fine. Please spare him. Hie Hie came to her senses at this time, and hurriedly grabbed Hie Hie's left hand and pulled it back. In a trance, I seemed to hear someone calling. But this is just a dream. Although there was nothing around, only blood and bones. In the distance there are many skeletons taller than the mountains. Some have a pair of bony wings on their ribs. The 2 rows of teeth on the skull still flashed coldly. There seemed to be a horn sound coming from the distance. It seemed as if I had to go. At the end, there is a pillar, perhaps made of bronze. Who is singing on the pillar? He made me. Push down the bronze pillar in front of you. It's enough, Hie Hie, spare him, brother. The world is gentle, the world is very gentle? Maybe it's time to wake up. Hie Hie turned around and walked back the way he came. The singing on the bronze pillar disappeared and turned into a fierce roar. It penetrates the clouds and shatters the earth. Annihilate everything in this dream. Buzz. Followed by a roar in my ears. The light golden red in his eyes also dissipated. The dragon scales on the neck disappeared at some point. Hie Hie seemed to see clearly for the first time. I lost all my strength in an instant. Cough cough cough. Followed by a sweet itch in the neck. Hie Hie covered his mouth and coughed up a handful of blood. Then my mind was in chaos. In his last glance before fainting, he seemed to see an eagle standing in front of him. And under his feet was a lump of white flesh. But why can't I see clearly through the eyes of this eagle? The golden light flows like countless sharp blades. Just like the eyes that opened in the endless darkness. The confusion of the way back to the mountains light up with that blazing flame, colorful clouds in the distance. Oh, every time life goes round and round to bloom in the wings. There was a song that seemed to be playing all the time. Very long. It was so long that Hie Hie had already woken up and could almost hum a few lines. He didn't seem to be in a hospital, but in a bedroom. There was a needle inserted in his right hand and an 4 drip was hanging on it. Rebirth, it's a very nice song. Although I don't know why. But after Hie Hie woke up, he suddenly felt relaxed all over. I could even sit up straight by myself, leaning against the headboard. It would be better if they didn't keep playing this song. Teacher Zhang. The person in front of me holding a bottle of snow beer and drinking it is Zhang Yan. That was the person who grabbed Hie Hie's arm in the clinic earlier. Excuse me, where is my sister, is she okay? Zhang Yan seemed to hear a strange question. Your sister? Hie Hie's expression remained unchanged, or rather, he didn't need to change at all, because he was expressionless at the moment. Li Ruin didn't seem to tell anyone in that family about my amnesia. So, since she calls me brother, doesn't that mean she should be my sister? Teacher Zhang, please answer my question. Where is my sister? Fengmo Yanhong didn't say anything, but just raised the bottle and started drinking. Seeing this, Hie Hie reached out to pull out the needle in his hand. She's in the kitchen. She said she's going to make your favorite meal. Help you cheer up. After hearing this, Hie Hie slowly lay back down. Although the inexplicable restlessness in his blood had disappeared, his body was extremely weak at this moment, as if all his strength had been sucked away. Thank you for the trouble at the clinic. Zhang Yan smiled and waved the empty bottle in his hand, sometimes making a circle, sometimes a square. That's no trouble, just throw some money and it will be fine. I care more. It's something else. Hie Hie couldn't help but clench his right hand into a fist under the quilt. But there was still no change on his face, and there was even a hint of concern in his tone. What is it that concerns you? Zhang Yan finally put down the empty wine bottle and lay down on the sofa. He even let out a cry of awe while lying down. How can we make a patient run faster than an Olympic sprinter? How can a patient? I almost crushed a fat man weighing several hundred pounds to death with one hand. When he said the last sentence, Zhang Yan was no longer sleepy. There was only coldness and cruelty in his eyes. Perhaps only then will someone associate it with ninja. Only then would they be horrified that this was a ninja from the Fuma family. Fengmo Yanhong. Chapter 25. Hie Hie stared at Fengmo Yanhong in front of him. Veins bulged on his right hand under the quilt. One hit. Even though he had already clenched his fists with all his strength, he still had to strike. Sitting there and waiting for death has never been his thing. Only by fighting hard can you find a way to survive. Hie Hie's recent mood and thinking changes have been too intense and rapid. This caused him to make many mistakes without realizing it. He showed his strength even without figuring out his surroundings. The most fatal moment is this moment. It is impossible for Fengmo Yanhong to appear beside him by such coincidence for no reason. Perhaps there are only two possibilities. First, Li Ruin asked Fengmo Yanhong to protect me secretly out of concern. Second, that despicable and evil dark strategist from the Tokyo Snake 8 clan has already discovered my existence. Fengmo Yanhong, this person's identity is too complicated. This made Hie Hie unable to analyze which possibility was higher. I really hope it's not the second one. Isn't it possible that Mr. Zhang drank too much and mistook the dream for reality? Ridiculous answer. But at this moment it is also a kind of rhetoric. What if it works? Click followed by the sound of the door lock opening. The door next to Fengmo Yanhong suddenly opened. Hie Hie carefully held a bowl of steaming instant noodles. There is also a fried golden egg on top. At this time Feng Mo Yanhong stood up suddenly at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Hie Hie. Hie Hie suddenly felt something was wrong, and a chilling panic rushed into his brain. Leave. A surge of strength came from nowhere and instantly poured into my whole body. It actually made him stand up on the bed in an instant. Xiao Yat, let me take it. If we walk a few steps, your brother's favorite food will fall to the ground. Zhang Yan slowly took the bowl of noodles from Hie Hie's hand. Then he said with some ridicule. Teacher Zhang, who are you looking down on? I often cook at home too. Serving soup noodles is the most basic of the basics. I'm really good at it. As he spoke, he consciously handed the noodles to Zhang Yan. Then he shook his hands in the air several times before he seemed to recover. There is some redness on the fingertips. Only then did the two of them notice Hie Hie, who had been petrified standing on the bed. And it seems to be in a posture as if it is about to run wildly. It looks very much like the bronze sculpture in the Vatican Museum, which was carved around 450 BC. There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. So Hie Hie lay down slowly and silently again and covered himself with the quilt. Wouldn't it be better to just bury yourself in the sand? Hey, Xiao He, if you don't die in society, you will live your youth in vain. Well, there's no outsider here, so don't mind it. As he spoke, he stood there laughing so hard that everyone fell over. It was even more harsh when it reached Hie Hie's ears. You are obviously the culprit. Is there anyone who can help the end face with that kind of speed and power? This guy must have done it on purpose. Hie Hie was overjoyed to see her brother wake up. An hour ago, in that clinic. After Hie Hie vomited blood and fainted, the fat doctor actually ran behind the counter and took out a knife. It screamed and rushed towards the three people, tearing into pieces. Hie Hie was terrified and quickly grabbed Hie Hie's hand and dragged him out. But her strength was so great that she could barely move an inch. At this moment, crystal tears were sparkling in her lively eyes. The blade with cold light flashed closer and closer until it stabbed in front of his eyes. But Zhang Yan didn't dodge or evade at all. When the knife was less than 10 millimeters away from his heart. Bang! It seemed like just a blink of an eye. The fat man fell backwards 3 or 4 meters away. And the knife. At this moment, it is clamped between the fingers of Zhang Yan's right hand. The drugs were deliberately overpriced, there was indecency, and there was no medical license in the clinic. The most important thing is, just now. You really want to kill me? Zhang Yan didn't even look at the fat doctor. He loosened his fingers casually and let the knife fall to the ground with a clang. It seemed so thrilling combined with what he said. The fat doctor sitting on the ground trembled with fright. His eyes were drooping, filled with resentment, even murderous intent. Not only just now, he still wants to kill them even now. But the people I met today are not normal. One hand alone can make him unable to move at all. One who can catch the knife between his fingers. A terrifying chill made him reach out and touch his right cheek, which was scratched by glass. Although it was not deep, blood was still flowing out. Should I have died many times today? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but cry again. Wow! I didn't, my face is bleeding. At this time, Zhang Yan finally looked at the fat doctor who was still sitting on the ground and throwing a tantrum. No, that's fine, but I'm scared. That little brother and I have beaten you before. Will you take revenge? When the fat doctor looked up, he saw Zhang Yan's harmless smile. All the thoughts in my heart were instantly annihilated. You can only repeat one action or one word over and over again. Shake your head and say no. Is that really a smile? Why can the fat doctor see countless ways of his own death in it? Fear could no longer describe the fat doctor's feelings at this moment. It felt more like waking up and falling from the sky. I accidentally glanced at the ground. But he found that there was no worldly creature on the ground, only complete darkness. There are still countless evil intentions lurking in the darkness. After hearing his answer, Zhang Yan slowly returned to normal. If someone accidentally saw Zhang Yan's eyes at that moment, they would find out. Countless ways of dying are happening to him. Before leaving, Zhang Yan took out a small checkbook from his pocket. He wrote an amount on it and gently placed it in the now limp fat man's hand. This is compensation for the glass. After giving it to him, he carried Hie Hie on his back. When leaving, Hie Hie couldn't help but look back. She felt it was so magical. How could someone who looked so sad and miserable just now suddenly become so happy? Hold the note in both hands and kneel down. It's as pious and natural as looking at a god. Smile like a child. Zhang Yan did not send Hie Hie to the hospital. Instead, he carried it to a rental house very close to here. Having said that, it is still much bigger than Hie Hie's house. Speaking of which, from the lobby window of this rental house, you can directly see the iron gate in front of the passage. Hie Hie asked Zhang Yan why he didn't send her brother to the hospital. But Zhang Yan replied, it would be dangerous to go to the hospital. He said he had encountered this situation before, and that by giving him some glucose, he would get better naturally soon. So Hie Hie believed it. Zhang Yan is my brother's teacher and has also taught in their class. And he just saved his brother. What reason do I have not to choose to believe? Although I don't know why a teacher would have medical glucose in his home. Sure enough, within an hour, Hie Hie really woke up. He can even stand up and exercise on his own. Well, get up and exercise. Zhang Yan placed the bowl of hot instant noodles on the bedside table at Hie Hie's end. Then he pretended to greet Hie Hie. I just woke up, eat slowly. Looks just like a teacher. Hie Hie ignored him completely. He got out of bed and squatted in front of the bedside table. Pick up the chopsticks on the edge of the bowl and gently pick up a few. Then chew it slowly and swallow it. Repeat this step and you'll soon finish the whole bowl. The poached eggs were saved for last. Leave. Hie Hie had just finished the last sip of the soup when he was suddenly called by Hie Hie's nickname. She couldn't help but stand up. Just like a candidate waiting for the announcement of the results. Very delicious. Hie Hie turned around and looked at Hie Hie with a bright and happy smile. Hie Hie also smiled proudly when she saw this. This is called, top of the high school list. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.